Good evening. I'd like to call to order the study session for the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for August the 7th, 2023. Thank you all for coming tonight. We have 4 study items on our study session tonight. Item number 1 is a presentation from the ARC. Item number 2 is Boards and Commissions Code Update Discussion. Item number 3 is creating a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Focused Advisory Committee. Item number 4 is parking and charging for electric vehicle and bicycles. We will start this meeting, as we do most of our meetings, with public comment to speak on any item that is on the agenda. And my first speaker on the list is Betsy Kopak. I hope that didn't get that too far off. All right, if you'd like to come to the podium and please introduce yourself, first name, last name. If you'd spell your last name for the record and give us an address, you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Betsy Kopak. Last name is Coppock. I live at 25 Skyline Drive in District 3. I wanted to speak on the electric vehicle charging item. As an EV owner and a member of Sustainable Wheat Ridge, I have an interest in accelerating EV charging capabilities in Wheat Ridge. And I'm pleased with the city staff proposal for EV charging. And I'd like to see that proposal implemented as soon as possible. With the many tax credits and rebates becoming available through the Inflation Reduction Act, the state of Colorado, and Xcel Energy, EVs become affordable for almost everyone and can quickly become the norm for new vehicle purchases. And many of the new rebates are geared to low and middle income earners. But EVs are only practical if you have easy access to low-cost charging. And today, that's only really available to single-family housing. And residents of multifamily housing, frequently those low and middle-income earners, need easy, everyday access to charging to take advantage of the credits and the rebates. And the best way to do that is to encourage charging infrastructure in all the existing buildings and to quickly require it in all new construction. Any delay in the EV charging infrastructure requirements is a multi-decade lost opportunity to each new construction site that is built here in Wheat Ridge for multifamily housing. And in addition, I want to talk about economic development. And in Wheat Ridge, it's a frequent stopping point, as you all know, for travelers from across the country headed to the hills. And ensuring that travelers have a spot to charge while dining or shopping in Wheat Ridge is essential to maintaining the economic vitality of Wheat Ridge. And as an EV owner, I have to tell you that while I'm on a road trip, I choose to stop and charge where I can also shop for food and drink and maybe dine. And I'm not going to make 2 stops. I'm only going to make 1, and I think that's really important for Wheat Ridge to realize that you have to have that charger there where I'm going to go shopping, or not me because I have mine at home, but anybody that is traveling through Wheat Ridge. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else signed up to speak on the agenda items tonight. If you're here in the hall and would like to speak, yes, ma'am, come to the podium, please. If you'd please give us your name and spell your last name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes, and the clerk is going to put the timing devices on.
Okay, great. Hi, my name's Kelly Blinn, B-L-Y-N-N, and I live at 4175 Brentwood Street in Wheat Ridge, and I'm also here from Sustainable Wheat Ridge, like Betsy. I'll try not to cover the same points. I also, in my day job, work at the Colorado Energy Office on transportation policy, and so have some perspective I can share about the state's overall strategy and programs to help accelerate EV adoption. As Sustainable Wheat Ridge, we submitted a letter supporting the staff's proposal on EV and bike parking and provided some recommendations, and just wanted to highlight a few of those briefly. On the EV parking proposal, our main point is that we believe the city should adopt an ordinance in line with the new state minimums as soon as possible. We believe this is feasible and in line with where the market is heading and can really help save costs in the long run by avoiding costly retrofits later. And if needed, there are grant funds available to support the city in making these code changes. Just a brief note on where the EV market is heading. Most major automakers have announced plans to switch their assembly lines to all-electric models by 2030 or 2035. And the state has just initiated a rulemaking to extend the existing Colorado Clean Car Standard, which, if approved by the Air Quality Control Commission this October, would increase the sale of EVs that must be sold per year to over 80% by 2032. If we allow buildings getting built now to not include any infrastructure to support EV charging, it will be a huge missed opportunity and will cause tenants and homeowners to have to spend much more later to retrofit parking areas and garages. We know it's not on the agenda currently, but for the same reasons, we urge council and staff to also consider taking up the state's new minimum solar-ready and electric-ready codes as soon as possible as well. We know you're waiting for the 2026 full energy code update, but these pieces could be adopted as standalone sooner and ensure more developments are primed for long-term sustainability. And again, there are grants available to support that work. For bike parking and e-bike charging, we really encourage council to support these efforts and use of these modes. E-bike use and state support via rebates and tax credits is increasing very rapidly. We should do everything we can to develop infrastructure to make it easy to own and use an e-bike for everyday transportation, which means better bike lanes, but also safe and secure places to lock them and charge them. I think one thing we did want to say about the bike parking proposal is we urge council and staff to consider decoupling the amount of bike parking from the amount of vehicle parking. Right now, it's sort of tied to how many vehicle spaces are required to get built, and council just adopted recently a proposal to lower the parking requirements for affordable housing. We think that's a great step in the right direction to lowering car dependence. And so we want to make sure that as we maybe lower the amount of parking that we're building at new sites, we are providing options to other modes and ensuring that there are enough spaces for people to park and charge their bikes. But thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. If there are any other folks in the hall tonight that would like to speak under public's right to speak, you may do so now. Please come forward. If you're joining us online, if you would please raise your hand in the virtual format, we will bring you into the meeting also. Please give us your name and address and spell your last name, and then the clerk is going to start the timer.
All right.
When you get
Good
that
evening.
done.
My name is Jenny Snell. That's S-N-E-L-L. I live at 7020 West 35th Avenue in Wheat Ridge. I just wanted to address council briefly on the creating a diversity, equity, and inclusion focused advisory committee. And just with a word of thanks, I was a co-chair on the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Task Force, and that was a heck of a lot of work, as you all know, and I really am grateful for your taking our recommendations and really putting those into action and pushing for the next step. And as you know, this is important work. There's a lot of really terrible things still going on, and I appreciate all of the work that you all are doing and really trying to advance that to the next step so that we can have that committee and our city can have that as a more permanent fixture. So just wanted to say thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak under citizens' right to speak or public's right to speak or joining us online? And I'll see, has anyone raised their hand online, Mr. Clerk? Anyone? Okay, looks like we've accommodated our speakers. We'll move on to the agenda item number 1. This is a presentation from the ARC, and Mary Ann Schilling, I believe, is going to introduce this. And if you all would like to join us at the table.
All right, thank you. Tonight we have with us Lori Ropa, the Executive Director, and Veronica Wernsman, the Community Engagement and Event Specialist from the ARC. They're here tonight to talk a little bit about who they are and what they do, and then they'll show a little video and be available for discussion and to talk about ways that the city might be able to partner with the ARC. So I will hand it over to Lori to get us started.
Thank you.
I push the button.
You do.
Ooh, all right. Bring it closer.
There
How about
you go.
that? Is that better? Good evening. Thank you so much for having us with you this evening. I am Lori Ropa. I'm the Executive Director of the chapter of the ARC that serves Jefferson, Clear Creek, and Gilpin counties. So we kind of go up into the hills as well. Veronica Wernsman and I are here to start a conversation. I'm not here to present at you. I'm really much better at talking with you. And so in our time together, I would love it if we could actually have a little bit of an exchange. So I may ask you to respond to some things. But first, I'd really like to start with some information about who we are and what we do. Let me ask, how many of you have shopped at the ARC thrift stores, either here in Wheat Ridge or elsewhere? Excellent. I want to give you our deepest appreciation because about 85% of my operating budget comes from those thrift stores. But we are not the thrift stores. So they're actually a separately incorporated 501c3 nonprofit organization with the purpose of funding chapters of the ARC across the state. And the chapters are the ones that work directly with individuals with IDD, in intellectual and developmental disabilities. The shorthand that we use is IDD, and their families, to help them have the most fully inclusive lives possible. So the beautiful thing about the thrift stores is that our chapter, and none of the chapters, 15 chapters across the state, have to spend every minute of our day trying to figure out how to keep the lights on, right? We're able to have our basic operational funding covered, which is a huge gift to us because it allows us to really, really focus on the mission. So apart from who we aren't, let me tell you a little bit about what we do. The ARC chapters, all ARC chapters in Colorado, are part of a huge ARC chapter network. The ARC has a national presence, the ARC of the United States, and they have an office in DC, and they deal primarily with public policy at the federal level. We have a state chapter, the ARC of Colorado, and then there are more than 600 chapters across the country that are all trying to create inclusive and full lives for people with IDD. So it's a tremendously powerful movement, and we are so grateful to be connected to organizations that have the same value system and are trying to achieve the same goals because we work together quite frequently. So the ARC of Colorado does a lot of our state public policy work, but they can't do it without the local chapters because the families that need support and the individuals that need support, they come to us for help. So let me just give you a little bit of an example of what an individual might come to us for. Somebody, and we serve people birth through end of life. So someone may come to us with a school-aged child. That child has a dual diagnosis of autism and Down syndrome. The child is having some behavioral issues in the classroom, and they want to suspend the child. Parent is out of their mind. They don't know what to do. They're very frustrated. They feel like the school's not listening to them. Nobody's focused on the child. Everybody's just mad at each other. And the ARC is there to help refocus the conversation on the student, how we can make sure that that child gets adequate supports in the classroom to be successful. So it's not about blaming. It's about finding those solutions and thinking about things differently. So at that age spectrum, we have a lot of school-age work. I would say about 80% of our caseload in the children and families is school stuff. Although people come to us for early, they don't even have a diagnosis. They just know that there's not a typically developing child, and they're gonna need some additional support. On the other side, on the adult world, many of the adults who come to the ARC for support, they are developing self-advocacy skills. So they're finding their own voices, being provided with tools and support to be able to talk about what they need and get help when they need it, to be able to help create the life that they would like to lead and not have it decisions made for them. Many of those people that come to us, they don't have what we would call natural supports. So probably a lot of you in this room have great families, and you have people who love you and they're there for you. Not everybody has that. And so oftentimes when an adult comes to the ARC for support, it's because they don't have that strong natural support network in their world. And they need somebody to help advocate with them so that they can make their needs known. So it could be anything. It could be employment related, it could be housing related, it could be benefits related. We had a gentleman who was 37, he had cerebral palsy, he was swimming every day to keep muscle tone. That's allowed him to keep himself reasonably independent. And one day the state, in its infinite wisdom, decided that that was recreation and they weren't going to pay for it anymore, and he could not access swimming unless he could pay for it privately. If you can imagine being in an appeals system for Medicaid, first of all, that should be horrifying enough, but then think you also have a cognitive disability and a physical disability. How are you going to navigate that on your own? You're probably not. You're probably going to get frustrated and give up and then not get what you really need, which is to be able to keep your muscle tone strong. 9 months later, that appeal actually went through and he was able to regain his benefits, but that was 9 months of work. So it could be anything and everything. Because the size of Jeffco and the population of Jeffco, many, many people that we serve are here. Most of the people that we serve are here, and many are from Wheat Ridge. We also have staff from Wheat Ridge. We have a number of our volunteers are from Wheat Ridge. The families that we serve are also in Wheat Ridge. And we're going to see a video in just a minute about a family who does live in Wheat Ridge, and you'll get to hear their story. And I hope that it gives you some real context to what some of the barriers are that people with IDD face in the community. So whenever, Marianne, whenever you're ready, if you can cue up our video, that would be awesome. I'll also add, while she's doing that, that we have a self-advocacy group called People First of Jefferson County that we sponsor. They actually are all individuals, adults with IDD, who have their own board, they have their own agenda, and it is about being a self-advocate. And so actually many of our self-advocates in that group are from Wheat Ridge. So it's really exciting to be able to come and talk with you. Meet the Fishers.
Hi, I'm Matt, and this is my wife, Jenny. And like many of you, at one point in time, disability was not a part of our lives. We didn't know a lot of people with disabilities. We didn't think a lot about disabilities. When our twins, Penny and Cece, were born, our oldest son, Max, was not quite 2 years old at the time. And we were really enjoying life after that happened and having a good time. It was chaos, but it was great, and we were having a lot of fun. You know, the hardest thing for us was just dealing with all that comes with having 3 young children in the house. Disability wasn't really much a part of our lives, and then one day it was.
When the twins were 11 months old, Cece died in my arms while choking on a piece of her dinner. We called 911. Paramedics came, and they resuscitated her. She was life-flighted to Children's, where we spent the next 6 weeks with her, recovering. The twins had their first birthday party in the hospital cafeteria, and we weren't at all thinking about the rest of her life or our lives. We were just trying to keep her alive.
And the time in the hospital was a very confusing time for us. We didn't really know what the future held for us. After about 5 days in the hospital, Cece had an MRI that showed global brain damage, something that I think at the time we didn't really fully understand. We didn't know really where we were going from there. Cece struggles with communication, she struggles with feeding, she struggles with movement, she struggles with muscle control. But when you get to know her, she's one of the most wonderful children you could ever hope to meet. Her strength becomes evident, and her joy in life becomes evident, and her amazing sense of humor becomes evident.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's hard to start talking after seeing those pictures again for the first time in quite a while. But about 4 years or so after Cece's accident, we found ourselves in a really happy place. We were so happy that we decided 3 kids weren't even enough, and we decided to have Elliot, the littlest one right here. That wasn't an easy place to get to. It wasn't always easy for us to see what a wonderful life that we have. Luckily, while we figured it out, we had the support of friends and family and the vision of the ARC to help us. After Elliot was born, I was lucky enough to be the more expendable of 2 incomes. and I got to take a year of leave from my job. I spent a lot of it shuffling Max and Penny to school and other activities, but the majority of my day was spent with Elliot and Cece. After drop-off one day, we stopped by McDonald's so I could grab a drink. I was very, very happy, but very tired, needed the caffeine. When it was done, we left. While I was buckling Elliot into the car with Cece sitting on the sidewalk waiting, a woman in a convertible Sebring with the top pulled down parked next to us. At the time, we had this beast of a van. It was a Ford E150 with a huge swinging arm, and it was quite a process to load even 2 kids into it. The woman watched me the whole time, which was kind of awkward. While I was lifting C into the van, the woman suddenly said loudly to me, "I've been feeling sorry for myself lately. But then I saw you. You probably never get to go to a bar or travel or anything. You've given me perspective. Thank you." I didn't know what to say at first. The first thing I thought was, "Hey, nice Sebring." Then I thought, this is only half my kids, and these are the 2 that won't run away, so catch me on a bad day. Elliot, as you can see, is now more than capable of running away. And then I realized, oh, she doesn't see. She doesn't get it. She doesn't see how wonderful this is. She doesn't see how lucky I am. She's looking at my daughter, and she sees a burden, a barrier to an enjoyable life. When the truth is, Cece is the light of my life. She didn't see Cece's quick sense of humor, her smile, the way that she has figured out how to communicate with her eyes and subtle movements. She doesn't see the joy I feel every time I look at her. What I said back to her was this. I said, well, I got to do plenty of those things when I was younger. It's true. I was lucky enough to travel a lot in my early adulthood, and bars, I went to those too. So I just said back to her, this is my life now, and I'm very lucky and happy. It bothered me that she didn't even consider the possibility that Cece understood her, and I knew that C did. As I was pulling out slowly in the huge van, I explained to Cece that the woman just didn't understand how special she was. Then again, I can't necessarily blame the woman in Sebring for not understanding. There's a picture of me, the first one taken after arriving home from the hospital with Cece. It still embarrasses me a little bit. I'm holding Cece on the couch, and I look miserable. I thought life was over. I didn't know what to do with the pieces. I couldn't see what I was holding, and it took me 2 years to see it. So if the woman at McDonald's couldn't see it, and I couldn't see it, why would anyone? When I did come around, I discovered that most other people never realized the joy that is our life, and our daughter, and our other kids. Sometimes they feel sorry for us. Sometimes they compliment our efforts, which is fair, because it's a lot of work. And often they just ignore us because nobody wants to be reminded of how quickly things can go wrong in life. Rarely do they look on us with envy. They can't see what a wonderful life this is. They can't hear Cece's unique and wonderful voice. The ARC sees Cece, and the ARC hears her voice. At some point, my wife Jenny connected with the ARC through old friends. We first heard about the training they offered for parents of kids with special needs, and we realized that there were resources beyond the survival level ones we'd mostly been seeking to that point. We also learned that we were members of a wonderful community that we haven't even known anything about, and that there was an entire organization devoted not just to hearing our story, but to helping us, and Cece in particular, thrive while continuing to write that story. The ARC saw that the day of the accident was not the end of the story, it was the beginning. Although we only took the one training course, we've stayed closely connected to the ARC and the community that surrounds it. We know that we can come to the ARC's events without feeling remotely out of place. We know that the ARC will continue to encourage relationships between families that can understand and support each other. We know that the ARC is advocating for our families and others like ours in the legislature, in the schools that sometimes need it so badly, and in the community. The ARC hears Cece's wonderful voice and makes it heard by others who might not listen otherwise. The ARC is our ally. They believe what we believe. The ARC believes that Cece should be defined by her strengths, abilities, and her inherent value, not by her disabilities. The ARC believes that Cece is entitled to the same level of respect, dignity, equality, and safety as anyone else. The ARC believes that Cece belongs in the community and has the right to be included and participate in all aspects of life. The ARC believes that the broader community will be better off for having the chance to know Cece. And they believe that Cece should be heard, even by people in Sebring who think life is all travel and drinks. Thank you for being here today to hear Cece's story, and thank you for supporting the ARC. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cece.
Thank you for hearing my voice.
So you didn't know you'd need Kleenex today. But the Fishers were generous with their story. It's not easy to tell people what that journey has been like. And we reached out to them before our coming here and specifically said, we're coming to speak to the City Council. Are you okay with us sharing your story? And they were so pleased to allow us to share this with you. These are your residents. They're our community, but they're your community. And so I wanted you to hear from them, directly from them, about what their world is like and what some of the preconceptions are that are out there. And I'd love to hear from you if anything came up for you watching this video and hearing their stories. What were you thinking and feeling as you were hearing from Matt? Or watching Elliot run around in circles? Yeah, Corey and then Rachel.
Well, I've actually known the Fisher family for, gosh, I don't know, a decade or so. Penny, their other daughter, and Max are both black belts at my karate school. But they're an amazing family, and they're advocates for not only for CC but for people like CC and people that you guys work with. So there's definitely a lot of value I've seen over the years. It's difficult as a family, right? Especially with they have 4 kids, to be able to go anywhere. But
even if they're typical kids,
right? Even and especially when you have somebody with some extra needs, as CC does. But it's awesome the work that you guys do with them, and I've seen it over the years personally. And their family benefits a lot from you guys, and you can hear it in Matt's voice that they couldn't get through a lot of the stuff that they've gone through without your help. So thank you. It's awesome.
Thanks. Rachel, you had something.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that video. Like Corey and others, I've actually known the Fisher family for a long time. My son and Max were good friends in pre-K and kindergarten, and actually when Elliot was born on June 30th, Max came over and spent the night with my son and their friend Sam, and so we remember that night well. But what really stands out to me in this context, watching this, having known the Fisher family for probably 14 years now, is when I met them, it was a world I didn't know that much about, and Jenny is just incredibly passionate and vocal. I think steward of her family and them as individuals, and then them as family. And what I'm realizing tonight, watching the video and reflecting on my experiences with the Fisher family, is how much I learned about who Cece was and how she was in our world and the opportunities available to her. And I'm realizing now how much of that came through ARC. And so not only are you touching the Fisher family, but by touching them, you're touching so many other people in our community who may not have that firsthand experience. And so we're really fortunate. The Fishers were living in Lakewood, and then they moved to Wheat Ridge. So we're really glad they're here. But it's just really striking me tonight, how much work your organization has done to support, that family as a whole, and Cece as an individual, and then how much I've learned and grown through that as well. So thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank
presence.
you.
Yep.
Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you. So like others in this room, I also know the Fishers, and Jenny had actually invited me to a couple of the annual ARC fundraisers. And when attending, I learned a lot about the organization, and I love that you explained kind of the difference between, you know, the ARC thrift stores, but how they fund your organization and provide all of these opportunities for families. And you know, it's really an incredible story. It took a while for Jenny to kind of open up and share the story, and it's something that could happen to all of us. And having her share that with others in our community makes that all of us acutely aware that it could happen any day to anyone, including all of us in this room. So it's a wonderful story, and I appreciate you sharing it with us, because it does go to show that you support and help those here, and that we all happen to know. So thank you, ladies. Appreciate it.
We're glad to do it. I think the most important thing that the ARC does, we do help individuals, we do help families, absolutely. But when we work with partners in the community to create a more accessible and a more embracing community, then we have fewer moments like Matt had, right, where people feel sorry for him when they see him, where they really don't realize that they don't have to be, that CC isn't a burden. CC is an amazing light. And so the more we can do to help the community start to feel comfortable with embracing IDD as part of your diversity, equity, and inclusion effort. In fact, our conversations at the ARC are about AEI, access, equity, and inclusion, as opposed to diversity, because I think a lot of people kind of hear the word diversity and they've heard it too much. They're just like, oh my God, I can't hear it anymore. But really it's about access. Can everyone access all that Wheat Ridge has to offer? And so for that, you know, we have to move from, and this isn't a statement about Wheat Ridge, it's about our world, to move from a mindset of compliance. So we have the ADA, people should have access, and now we're going to figure out how to comply. That's one level. But we can do better than that. We can do better than just compliance. We can move to a place of understanding and acceptance and embracing, where people feel like they belong everywhere. So I hope as you guys start to think about how we can work together, I can tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that we're doing in other communities, just so that you're aware that you can always reach out to us as a resource. And Veronica has some materials that she's going to share with you that you can, we can also send you electronically. But some examples of things that we're doing. The City of Lakewood does have a diversity committee. I don't remember what it's called, council committee. And we have had people sit on that council and provide lived experience perspective. We have connections to the people who live in your community that you might not know, that aren't the Fishers, because they don't have time, they have 4 children. But we can always provide you with connections to people who have lived experience. That is an open offer. We can always come and provide information to groups that you have who are working on things. We've worked in support of creating accessible playgrounds. You see the beautiful playground that's fully accessible down at Clement Park. There's one up in Arvada. We help support the development of those things to help make sure that people with all abilities could come play together. Those kinds of things infuse a culture of acceptance and embracing into everything you do, as opposed to looking at it as a separate thing. And so the information that we've provided has some suggestions on ways that we might be able to support you as you move forward with any initiative. When you're thinking about transportation, think about the fact that when fixed bus routes are eliminated, that means Access-a-Ride goes too. That's a problem. So we have to be cognizant of that. So really, I guess I'm here for a few reasons. One is because I was invited, and I appreciate that. 2 is that I want to offer to be a community partner. The ARC is always here for you to refer people when you meet them and they need our support. to navigate some kind of crazy situation and they don't know what to do, but also to know that we're working with your school districts. We're working with the police department. We're working to create a community in the entire county that we can all be really proud to say embraces everyone. And so this was just a wonderful opportunity to share with you a little bit more. A lot of people do think we're the thrift stores, and I do not for a moment want to understate their importance. We are deeply grateful for that social enterprise because it keeps our doors open. But we help about 1,000 unique individuals a year, which is not bad for 8 advocates now. And they navigate any possible situation so that people don't feel like they're alone. They're never left on their own. It's remarkable that we do this with private funding. We don't actually accept government funds, just so you know, I'm not here asking you for money. And the reason we don't is because we always want to be seen as 100% independent, advocating for the best interest of that individual, whatever they need. That there's no compensation to us for keeping somebody on a benefits role or anything of that nature. So we're really proud of that. And I would love if you had questions or there are things that you see, given the information we just handed out, that you'd like to ask about. Would love to answer questions for you. Yeah.
Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. Listening to you speak, a couple of things come to mind, and I just want to be mindful of your organization's capacity, but it seems like a really meaningful place for your organization to connect would be at our boards and commissions level. So, presenting like with our Parks and Rec Board and talking about accessibility in our Parks and Recreation and what that looks like. I also think like our Cultural Commission and what does like accessible art look like for people with disabilities. And then, those two in particular, but like maybe some of our boards and commissions would really benefit, not just hearing from your organization, but like some of the people you serve in our community.
Absolutely.
So that those perspectives are really like resonating through. And I think a lot of places where thoughtful decisions are made, that that community voice would be like really valued. So if that's in the scope of things, I'm thinking I have a neighbor whose son is autistic, and she, when I was first elected, she was really pressing me, and I in turn was pressing our then Parks and Rec director to get more funding to do swimming lessons for people with autism because they are so much more likely to die of drowning than non-autistic people. And so just something like that in our community is really important to know and understand, that like learning to swim when you're autistic can make a huge difference and save a life. So boards and commissions a great way to let that come forward.
Thank you. I think Councilor Weaver has.
Thank you for the presentation. I learned a lot. I had a quick question. Do you also serve people with brain injuries and who have had a sudden accident or that find themselves in a chronic situation such as this?
It depends on the onset age of the injury. So there are federal and state definitions of intellectual and developmental disability, whether it happens after 18 or after 21. The long and short of it is, if it's happened primarily as an adult and someone were to reach out to us, we would refer them out. But nobody ever gets a, sorry, we can't help you, bye, good luck. Every phone call we get gets returned, and we would reroute that person to someplace more appropriate if there is a better place for them to be served.
Gotcha. Thank you. And just to follow up on Ms. Hulteen's comments, I'd love to see this conversation as we are thinking about filling in our sidewalk gaps in Wheat Ridge, how to prioritize, certainly all the advice we can get on how to prioritize that for different abilities and moving around Wheat Ridge and being able to walk and recreate. And that has to do with snow removal as well. So I'm saying this out loud, not just to you all, I know you know this, but we have some issues with people having to walk in the middle of the streets when it snows and so,
Understood.
I would love to see this be part of our conversation as we move forward with closing some of those gaps in walking.
I had an individual working at the ARC who used a wheelchair, and he was trapped in his apartment in Thornton for 4 days.
Yeah.
His provider couldn't get in, and he couldn't get out.
Yeah.
So it was a real problem.
Well, I think it could be a really great opportunity to teach people about why they need to go out and shovel sidewalks. And, you know, that's been some pushback on that as well.
I can understand.
So, just bringing it into that it's inclusivity, like you say. I like the way you phrase it. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you. Counselor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. Your Ms. Hulteen's comments about having you work with the boards and commissions got me thinking, what, I think you mentioned Lakewood, right? What is it that you guys do with the task force in Lakewood?
We're involved in a number of different ways in Lakewood right now. They have I wish I knew the name of it. It's a diversity, equity, inclusion sort of council that we came and spoke with them about including disability in their definition, help them understand what full inclusion really might look like. So that was one opportunity. We don't currently have anybody sitting on that council, but that's something that we would love to see is someone with lived experience on a council, on a board, on a committee, who can provide that perspective rather than somebody like me who's informed but not living it. It's a different perspective, so a highly valued participation, and we can always reach out within our community when there are opportunities and say, the City of Wheat Ridge would love to have your participation. You live in Wheat Ridge, would you like to serve? And if that person needed some additional supports, we might be able to provide that as well.
Okay.
So it just would depend on the individual and what they needed.
That's great. Well, our next 2 agenda items are all on our boards and commissions, and we're creating, it sounds kind of like exactly what Lakewood has, which is an advisory committee that maybe we can reach out to your organization to help find somebody to serve on it. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. A couple questions I have is, does ARC offer pre-vocational training and job placement?
We don't. That is actually something that happens through the service system. So it's Medicaid funded, and that happens through, well, the system is changing, but currently through DDRC, which is primarily funded through Medicaid. So those are Medicaid reimbursed services. So if somebody needed those supports, we would make sure to get them connected, and they could then engage with a job coach and an employment counselor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Counselor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a brother with Down syndrome, and that was in the 50s. There was no help. They were institutionalized. And I saw what my parents went through and what it did to our family. There was no help. United Way would participate for a while, and then they stopped. And so then it was up to my parents to be able to fund my brother being in an institution. And they would be getting telegrams all the time that, he got hit by a bicycle or he needed sutures and different things. I just want to thank you for helping, because it wasn't there. There was nothing. And this just didn't start. I think about years prior, there was nothing out there, And so, and also, these children didn't stay in the homes. Okay, there was nothing, no help to handle that. So I really do appreciate that, how far it has come, to where the children can stay in the home. And of course, it depends on severity of the condition, you know. But thank you very much.
I so appreciate your words, and especially as someone who really understands where this has come from. The ARC was started in 1960 by parents who got together who said, no more. You're not taking our children anymore. We finally decided we want to keep them at home. And then, I mean, we stand on huge, broad shoulders. The families at some point later than that said, wait a minute, our kids deserve an education. They're children, and the system said, your kids are not educable. You cannot teach those children. They're not even trainable. And the families that founded the ARC chapters are the families that made those pieces of the movement move. And I am humbled by their work. But we know we're not done, right? We know we're not done. We've come a long way. Classrooms are primarily integrated. People with IDD are out in the workforce. Closed the front door on sheltered workshops, and now sheltered workshops are being disbanded, and community integrated employment is where people want to be. They want to live in the community, they want to work in the community, they want to have social lives in the community, they want to go to the same church that's in their neighborhood. They don't want to be separate. And so we continue to nudge those boundaries further and further out to try to make sure that people really are a part of their community. So thank you for your very kind words, and I am grateful every day for all of the work that came before us.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you for a wonderful presentation. As you saw at your opening question, we're very familiar with the retail presence of ARC. I'm glad to have them in our community and support them, and glad to have your people with EDI employed there and helping and working there, and glad to have you working in our community. And we met at the opening there, and I'm really glad that we were able to have you come and tell us more about your organization. We appreciate the work you do, and we'll look for other ways to collaborate.
Excellent. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move to our agenda item number 2. This is the boards and commissions code amendments. And Mr. Goff, introduce our
Yeah, we have a team here this
presentation
evening for this,
team.
but Marianne Schilling is, I think, firing up the presentation. But Marianne, are you going to introduce this item again?
I can do that, yes.
And/or Ally?
Well, first, I would like to introduce our new management analyst, Cole Hayslip. He's been here for 2 months now, so I think for some of you, it's your first time meeting him, so welcome, Cole. We decided to give him something really fun, like boards and commissions update to get him started. So as you know, we are here, we want to make some updates related to the boards and commissions process. We have a lot of really interested residents who want to get involved in the city, and so Cole is tasked with figuring out ways to improve our processes. He has a lot of decision points for you all to discuss, and so we are excited to see where the conversation goes. So take it away, Cole.
Before that, push your green button,
Thank
and
you.
then we're gonna get you on the record.
Yes, could you tell I'm new? So I have a handout for everyone, so I will pass that around.
Thank you.
Sorry, no, for you,
None for me.
we can share. All right, well, thank you all very much for the opportunity to present tonight on boards and commissions code amendments. So before we get started, I would like to address the handout that I just gave you all. This is our council option guide. In this guide are all the different items that we're going to be discussing tonight and council's options related to each and every item, as well as staff's recommendations in bold among those options. So as this is a really lengthy subject with lots and lots of options, we are suggesting that you approach this item like a consent agenda, where after this presentation, the council determines which items they would like to discuss in more depth, reach consensus on those items, and then adopt the rest of staff's recommendations in bulk. So let's get started by going over our presentation agenda. So we're going to start this presentation out with the background, going over why we got here, why we're discussing this issue tonight. Move on to a discussion of the different public bodies here at the City of Wheat Ridge and which ones we're going to be talking about tonight. Move into our various discussion topics and then come to the end of the presentation. So let's start with our background, why we got here, why we're discussing this issue tonight. The City of Wheat Ridge has several public bodies, and all of them are really essential to the city. Each of them have different missions and activities, and some of them play an advisory role to the City Council, while others act as liaisons between the community and the City Council. And some of them even make quasi-judicial decisions which have lasting impacts on our community. Over time, these public bodies have changed dramatically as the needs of the City of Wheat Ridge have changed dramatically. And currently, we're facing the change that we've seen unprecedented interest in serving on our boards and commissions. During the February 27th, 2023 council meeting, the council recognized the need to review the boards and commissions code to adapt it to those contemporary needs and the changes that are happening here in the city. And that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. But before we get into that, let's quickly go over our public bodies here at the city and cover which ones we'll be talking about. So we have our authorities, like Renewal Wheat Ridge and the Housing Authority, which are not accountable to our municipal charter. Rather, they are accountable to our state statute, and in the case of the Housing Authority, the federal statute under which they are established. Next, we have our boards and commissions, like the Planning Commission and the Cultural Commission, that are accountable to our municipal charter as well as our municipal code. And then finally, we have our uncodified committees, like Sustainable Wheat Ridge and the Active Adult Center Advisory Committee, which also aren't accountable to our charter or code. Rather, they are created using the powers and council's rules, and they are accountable to their own bylaws. So tonight, we are not going to be talking much about our authorities, if at all. We are primarily going to be discussing amendments to our municipal code that cover boards and commissions. And then finally, at the end of this presentation, we'll be covering a policy related to our uncodified committees. And with that, let's get into our discussion items. The first item we'll be discussing tonight is term limits, which are, of course, limits on the amount of time that you may serve on a board or commission. The standard length of one term for all our boards and commissions is 3 years, except for the Election Commission, which has a term length of 2 years to align with the election cycle. When we started looking at this topic, staff wanted to look at how the lack of term limits has impacted our boards and commissions. We found that there have been 468 board appointments made since 1970, and the median length of time that someone has served on a board or commission is 3 years, or one standard term. However, the average length of time that someone has served is about 4.5 years. And whenever we have such a large difference between the average and the median like we do there, that tells us there is a small amount of people who have served a really long time on our boards and commissions, and as a result, had a really significant impact on the advice that they give to the city council and on the quasi-judicial decision that those boards and commissions make. So, in an effort to try to find a solution to this, staff started looking at term limits that do not prevent board members from serving an extended term in the absence of any other qualified applicant. And as a result, we're recommending a 3-term limit which would be 9 years for most of our boards and commissions. As an alternative, the council could select a 2-term limit or no term limit. Because we're talking about term limits, we also feel it's important to talk about midterm appointments and whether or not we should count them as a full term or no term. The problem here is that the city has never had a consistent policy on this, and it really hasn't mattered. But again, because we're considering term limits, we need to decide when someone gets appointed in the middle of the term, how do we count that? Staff is recommending the rounding approach. And under this approach, if someone is appointed to a midterm appointment that is less than half of the length of a term, then that would not count as a full term. But if they're appointed to serve a term that is 50% or more of the length of a standard term, that would count as a full term. The alternative to this is to always or to never count a midterm appointment as a full term. Next, we'd like to discuss extended terms. And if you recall from a couple slides ago, extended terms are what we call the terms that someone serves after they've become term limited because there's no qualified applicant to replace them. The first item we'd like to cover related to extended terms is their length, and we're recommending that the council make them at will for the length of a standard term, which would mean that these term-limited board members could be replaced by a qualified applicant at any time. An alternative to this is to make these extended terms 1 year, like the council reached consensus to for the URA, or to make these extended terms the length of a standard term. We would also like to discuss the maximum number of extended terms that someone could serve. And we are recommending that the council make this indefinite, meaning that there's no limit on how many extended terms someone can serve. And we're recommending that because we feel like it would be in the best interest of the board or commission that if there isn't a qualified applicant, that board or commission would be able to be as close to full membership as possible. The alternative to this is to limit it to 1 standard term length. Finally, the last item on term limits, we'd like to discuss whether or not to make these permanent or consecutive term limits. Consecutive term limits have what we call a cooling off period, which is the gap between when you stop serving because you've been term limited and when you can reapply to that board or commission to serve again. We are recommending that the council make these consecutive term limits with a standard term length cooling off period, which would mean after you've become term limited and replaced for most of our boards and commissions, there's a 3-year gap between that time and when you can apply to be on the board or commission again. The alternative to this is to have consecutive term limits with a different length of time for that cooling off period, or to have permanent term limits, meaning when you become term limited, you can never serve on that board or commission again. All right, moving on from term limits, we would like to discuss serving on multiple boards at once. So currently, it's written into the code that board members cannot serve on multiple boards at once. But there are several other cities that allow board members to serve on multiple boards at once. And we've heard from our existing membership and from some of the people who have applied that there is a significant interest on serving on multiple boards at once. So in an effort to accommodate this, staff is recommending that we change the code to allow people to serve on up to 2 boards at once. And we're recommending up to 2 because we have concerns about the diminished effectiveness of board members that serve on more than 2 boards at once. Because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of responsibility. The alternative here is to change the code to allow someone to serve on multiple boards at once, or to limit them to serving on only 1 board at a time, which is currently the case. As we are considering this item, we did want to let the council know that there is no conflict of interest between serving on 1 board, for example, the Planning Commission, and another board, like the Parks and Recreation Commission. The next item that we'd like to inform the council of is that we are going to be changing our board member application. So the council will be very familiar with the existing board member application. We are going to change that to allow people to select all the boards and commissions that they'd like to serve on and then rank their preferences. There's an attachment in your packet that provides a good example of what this might look like. And again, we're not looking for direction on this item. We just wanted to let the council know, that way you'd be prepared for it when we come back to you with a whole bunch of applications at once that look a little different. But on this subject, we would also like to discuss staff liaison recommendations. So staff liaison recommendations mean that when the council receives their packet of applications, a staff liaison recommendation is included in there from that liaison that says, among those applicants, here's who we think would be the best person to serve on this board or commission. Historically, there have been times where the city has done this, and then there have been times when the city has not, like currently. So we've come to the council to ask for some direction on this item so we have a consistent policy moving forward. And we are recommending to include those staff liaison recommendations because we feel like that staff liaison has a really good understanding of the mission and activities of the board that they work with, as well as the existing strengths and weaknesses of the board members who are serving on that board. And as a result, they would be able to give a quality recommendation to the council to consider. The alternative to this is to not include staff liaison recommendations in the packets that the council receives. The next item to discuss is broadening council's authority to remove board members. So currently, the council can remove board members after a hearing by a majority vote for inefficiency, neglect of duty, malfeasance in office, or a violation of established rules and procedures. We are recommending that the council change the code, amending this and broadening their authority so that they could remove a board member at their discretion or for a violation of a code of ethics. The alternative to this is to only amend the code so that to add that the council can remove at their discretion, or to only amend the code so that council can remove someone for violating the code of ethics. Or of course you could maintain the current system. On the code of ethics, we do want to let you know that there was an attachment in your packet that is an example of what this code of ethics might look like. The goal behind the code of ethics is to establish ethical standards for board members in their official capacity as board members, as well as members of the public. If the council selects an option, including a violation of the code of ethics, staff will return with a revised version of that code of ethics for adoption at the same time as you adopt all the other boards and commissions code amendments. The next item to discuss is changing the definition of an unexcused absence. So currently, absences are only excused due to illness, a death in the family, or an emergency, which is a little undefined. Absences, for example, due to vacation, a logistical challenge, technical difficulties, life conflicts, those are all considered unexcused. And when we looked around at other cities, we found that this was a very narrow and very restricted definition compared to those other ones. So as a result, we're recommending that we change the definition so that an unexcused absence only occurs if that person fails to make a 7-day notice that they won't be able to make that meeting, or due to an illness, a death in the family, or an emergency. And because we are considering changing that definition, we do want to let the council know that if someone accrues a large number of excused absences, significant to the point where it is impacting the ability of that board or commission to operate, there is a method for that person to be removed. And so that still exists. The options for the council to consider are changing the definition as presented by staff, to change this definition in a different way, or to take no action and maintain the current definition. Also, on the topic of unexcused absences, we'd like to consider a change to our maximum unexcused absences policy. So currently, our code states that unexcused absences of more than 25% of meetings in a calendar year result in the automatic removal of that board member. This is a really difficult policy for staff to enforce, and to be honest, we haven't been doing a great job of tracking it or enforcing it up to the state. Part of the difficulty is we don't really know what 25% will be for all our boards and commissions until the end of the year, because some of them meet monthly, some of them meet more common, and some of them meet on a case-by-case basis. Also, because it is based on a calendar year, for example, someone who sits on a board or commission that meets monthly, that would allow them to miss meetings in October, November, December, January, February, March, and then April before being automatically removed, which really goes against the spirit of this policy. So we are recommending that we change it so that it is based on the number of unexcused absences in a year, meaning a 365-day period. Council's option here, and what we are recommending, is that 2 unexcused absences in a year result in automatic removal. Alternatively, the council could pick a different number, like 3 unexcused absences in a year results in automatic removal. Or they could maintain the current code. We do want to let you know, as we're considering making a change to this policy, that there is a process for a board to vote to make unexcused absences excused. So there is a little bit of a gray area and some discretion there for our board members. The next item to discuss is the city manager's appointment to the Cultural Commission. Yeah, this is a tough sore spot.
Non-recommended.
Bad appointment.
So our municipal charter says that the council shall make all appointments to all boards and commissions. But our code says that the city manager must make an at-large appointment to the Cultural Commission. So whenever we have a case where our code is not compliant with the charter, we need to make a change to our code to bring it into compliance. And to do that, because there is someone already sitting in that at-large position, we are recommending an amendment to the code so that the council appoints the at-large member of the Cultural Commission and amends the code to make it clear that the council can make at-large appointments. An alternative to that is to remove the at-large board member. The next item to discuss is codifying alternates to the Board of Adjustment. So the Board of Adjustment decides requests for variances and waivers of the city zoning, ordinance, and sign code and makes interpretations of these laws. Because of the significance of their responsibility, they require a supermajority to make any action. And because it is always in the applicant's best interest that a full voting board be present, the Board of Adjustment currently consists of 8 district members and 4 alternate members. And those alternate members can have voting powers in the absence of one of those regular voting members. The problem here is that these alternate members were never passed by ordinance, which is what is required by our municipal code. So, in order to rectify this problem, we are recommending that we codify the alternates because we feel like it makes some sense for this board to have those alternate members. And also, when you take a look around at other cities and their boards of adjustments, it's quite common that they would have alternate voting members. The other option for the council to consider is to remove these alternates. Moving on from boards and commissions code amendments, we would like to discuss an uncodified committee member appointment policy. So the problem here is that for some of our uncodified committees like Active Adult Center or Sustainable Wheat Ridge, it's currently unclear whether staff or the city council should make appointments to these uncodified committees. So in an effort to solve that problem, we are putting forward the following policy for the council to consider. And we are recommending that the council select the membership of council advisory committees, policy committees, and committees requiring broad public participation. We are recommending that city staff make the selection of technical committees, program advisory committees, and limited term community engagement committees. And we are recommending a hybrid option, wherein, for example, if there was a committee that required members that widely represented the community, that the council would make the appointment of those members. And if that committee had members that required technical expertise, staff would make the appointment of those members. If the city council adopts this policy, we are recommending that as a result, the council select the membership of Sustainable Wheat Ridge and the DEI committee we'll be discussing next, because of the advisory focus of each of those committees. So we are recommending that the council adopt the committee member appointment policy that I just presented to you. As an alternative to that, they could adopt an amended committee member appointment policy or take no action on this subject. So in conclusion, we have a lot of options in front of us to make boards and commissions code amendments to reflect the changes that we're seeing in the community and try to create boards and commissions that best serve those needs. And again, as this is a really lengthy subject with lots and lots of options, staff suggested the city council approach this like a consent agenda, whereby the council determines which items they would like to discuss further, reach a consensus on those specific items, and then for all the items that you don't need to discuss further, adopt staff's recommendations in bulk. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but for now, I'll turn the meeting back over to the mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, Cole. Questions? Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you for this, Cole. Bullet points and bottom lines are my favorite type of memo. I just wanted to clarify, though, when we're talking about term limit, it's 3 years per term, 3 terms, so it would be 9 years total. Is that correct?
Yes, for all of our boards and commissions, except for the election commission, which has a 2-year term to align with the cycle of elections. So for them, that would be 6 years.
Great, thank you.
Additional discussion? Councilor Weaver.
I really like all of the recommendations. I did have a question, though, about the one with serving on 2 boards at once. Just because I want to understand, because that's been a big deal for us, and had lots of questions about it. And I guess I'm not understanding how, if I'm on Planning Commission, which is dealing with quasi-judicial things, and I'm also on the Parks Commission, or the Parks Board? Parks and Rec Commission, sorry. Is there a difference between a commission and a board?
Not functionally.
Okay, thanks. So you'll forgive my wording. That feels a little close. I think what I'm concerned with is I would be more excited about allowing 3 terms and not having 2 boards. Does that make sense? I don't really like the idea of someone being on 2 boards for 9 years, each one of those boards. So everything else I really like, but for me, my sticking point is the 2 boards. That for me to support the term limit stuff, which I agree with, I would like to see only 1 board at a time. Even though I know people could do it. I know people are capable of it.
Thank you, Councilor Hulteen.
Thanks. I've got a couple of things, but I just want to go off of what Councilmember Weaver was just talking about. I'm also not a huge fan of the 2 boards, and I think when I look at some of the different types of boards, I mean, we've got high impact boards like Planning Commission and boards that are making really important decisions. I mean, all of our boards are very valuable, but quasi-judicial decisions and things that are accountable up to the federal levels. We heard with housing authorities. So I think limiting to one board is helpful there. But then the last decision we saw, there's a whole kind of gray suite of things that sort of trickle down. And I guess when we've got ad hoc things coming up and task force, there I'd like to see some flexibility, because our task force are actually best served when our board members show up for them, a lot of times with that depth of experience. So I think if there's a way to kind of thread that needle between our advisory boards and our quasi-judicial boards that are actually making financial and policy guidance in our city, then I think single service there. But anything that's temporary in nature or more focused, I think would be good. Do you want me to go on to the next thing, or does anyone else want to talk about that? Okay, my advisor to my right has asked for me to try and figure out if there are things. Did you mean just for that item or for all of them? Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah,
Let's
sorry.
not do a sidebar.
Yeah. So why don't you do that?
Counselor Hoppe, you're up next anyway.
Yeah, I just, one of the things that Cole had asked us was if there was a bulk consent that we could do, and then items that we wanted to discuss individually to pull off that bulk consent. And so I'm going to attempt to see what we can put on our bulk consent, and then we can move through the items one at a time and have our discussions to be able to keep the conversation organized. So,
I'd like to, some other people haven't spoken, and I'd like to do that first.
what I'm trying to do is the bulk consent, which would be, do we all agree on this one? We can add it to our list, and so we'll say, we consent to items, blah, blah, blah. And then when people want particular items pulled off, like item 6 is sounding like it's something that needs more discussion, we'll pull off those particular items and then have longer discussion on those, is what I was trying to do, is to organize so we're not bouncing around item to item, item to item.
Fine. Before we do that, I'd like to have a general discussion about the whole concepts, and so that everybody had a chance to speak. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Cole, for that presentation. It was a good speed for me to understand. So a couple questions and comments I have are, one, on the 7-day notice for like an illness or death. I think that could be kind of unreasonable. If there's that's what it said. Right? It said a 7-day notice if there's an event of a death.
So if I could clarify, what we're recommending is a 7-day notice or illness, emergency, or death. So
okay.
It's like, tell us if you're not going to be there, but we understand if there's something like an illness or a death that happens
Okay.
that you can't tell us about in time.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then my other comment was on the automatic dismissal of 2 unexcused absences. I just want us to be compassionate. I actually served along a planning commission member who, I was probably one of the only ones that knew at the time that she had terminal cancer. And so there were times when she couldn't make it, and I made sure that at that time I told Lauren Mekulak, like, by the way, she has cancer, she's getting treatments, and if it would have been an automatic, 2 days and you're done, I don't think that would have put Wheat Ridge in the best image. So I think as we look at that might sound good, but I just want us to be aware that sometimes we need to have a little flexibility and compassion and, to find out. I understand that, there might be something where somebody's just always, missing their board or commission appointments, but I want us to just look at this, and think about, and it's happened, and I wish I could say this was a one-off. Actually, when I got on the planning commission, I replaced somebody who was also terminally ill with cancer, and I ended up being on for, it was Dean Goki, and I replaced him on the planning commission. So I just want us to be aware of that, and I'm a little concerned about the automatic 2 times you miss, and then you're kicked off the board or commission, because sometimes it means a lot to these people of being involved with the city. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got the Councilor Stites and then Councilor Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do agree with that. I don't know that 2 unexcused absences are automatically gone as maybe a great policy. I don't know if there's a way to kind of look at that. Is there, and maybe this is a question for all of the staff or Mary Ann, are there members of our boards and commissions right now that would be in danger of losing their seats if we adopted a policy like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but because they haven't been to several meetings and we can't reach them and we don't have a really clear, good way to handle it.
Right.
So I think the key is that Cole mentioned that any board or commission could vote to make an unexcused absence excused. And I understand, I think, what Councilor Ohm is also getting at, which is there's sometimes a degree of confidentiality involved in that, and it might be that we would need to, if you support something like this, I think we'd need to really be training our liaisons, don't you think, Cole? To, because it's really the liaisons and I would think the chairs that we're going to be tasking with managing this, and probably more the liaisons over time in terms of consistency. But really here, the goal is, we have folks who move and don't tell us, leave the city and don't tell us. And yes, there are some real heartbreaking situations, but there's also just a lot of, oh, it's not for me and I'm not speaking up. And it's a lot of work. And some of these boards and commissions are trying to vote, can't reach a quorum. And so I think what we'd like to do is just have a really, frankly, efficient way to handle the obvious ones.
Yeah.
You know, I think more than anything, an efficient way to handle the obvious ones, knowing that, of course, I mean, our goal, we want people that want to serve,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe we could come up with some better language that could handle just what she said. Language that deals with the obvious ones, but also allowing some flexibility for cases like Mr. Holman mentioned, so.
I think it's a, like, on paper, I think it's a good policy.
Yeah.
I think that you need to have that, because I do know that and it's incredibly inconsiderate to, like, to show up to a meeting and you're not gonna have a quorum until you figure out when you get there, right? So I completely get that. And all of these boards and commissions need to function whether or not an individual or two individuals can make it or not, whether they're ill or not, because they do have to function. So, you know, if you're too ill or too whatever to be able to continue, that is a conversation that has to be had, right? It's not a fun one, but it's definitely one that has to be had. And it's, you know, it's how long it's going to be. If it's I can't make it for 3 months because I got to do something and then I'm fine, that's different, right? So, and the definition of excuse too, like, am I considerate enough to let people know that I'm going to be on vacation a month from now? Like, you know, I think that's simple common courtesy in a lot of ways. So I'm for everything in the packet the way it is, and I know Councilor Hoppe worked real hard with the staff and Cole on this to get it about right. And I'm open to the discussion about the two board thing, but you know, in some districts at this point, like, it's, do we find somebody off the street or do we take somebody who's pretty qualified that wants to do more? So I would rather let somebody serve on two boards than put somebody who's not committed there. So that's just mine.
Patrick?
Just to clarify on that point before we move on, just so council understands, the code does allow a person to sit on one of our boards and commissions and also one of the authorities. So you could sit on Urban Renewal Authority and a board and commission. So that's the only difference. It just, right now it says you can't serve on more than one board and commission. But, so our authorities are, remember, as Cole said at the beginning of the presentation, our authorities are a separate group. Our Urban Renewal Authority and our Housing Authority are separate from our boards and commissions. So somebody can sit on one of the authorities and also one of the boards and commissions. Okay, that's current code. Because you are on
Okay. Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just wanted to kind of speak on a few of these items, but did you want to go through beforehand, or, because I have some things on item 9 and item 10 and 6. So kind of in regards to the unexcused absences.
Before we get into the details, I want to say something, so.
Okay, so
if
I
everybody's saying that-
do have a general question
Okay,
as well.
good.
So there's a number 9, as far as the further analysis that staff identified, which just says amending the resident and registered voter requirement to allow people who live, work, attend school, own a business, or represent a relevant organization to serve on certain boards. It isn't reflected in this memo, and it wasn't reflected in the presentation. So I would not be supportive of allowing anyone that's not a resident to join a board or commission. I mean, I understand that, and if we want to have like maybe some one-offs where we pick out various boards or commissions and want to have a member at large that can live outside of the city of Wheat Ridge, I would be amenable to something of that nature. But opening up all of our boards and commissions and authorities for applications outside of our city, I just feel like when you live here, you're much more invested in the community. And that's not to say that those who own businesses aren't as invested. I know that that's a significant stakeholder within our community, but I feel like you need to live here and to be on one of these boards or commissions. So I just wanted to touch on that and see if you guys just kind of decided not to put that in here, or where you're at with that.
Yeah, so we didn't include that in the presentation because we weren't asking for council's direction on that item tonight. So those requirements are actually reflected in our municipal charter. So our plan would be to continue that conversation at a later date when we could consider possibly a charter amendment, since that isn't really feasible this year with the focus on the bond initiative. That's why we left it out of the presentation, and we just noted it as additional information in the memo.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions also. You talk about, or you've spoken about qualified applicants. Do we have or will we prepare qualifications for board and commission members?
Yeah, so what we mean by qualified applicants is just someone that would be eligible to serve. So someone who would be a resident and who would be in that district.
Okay.
And they have to be registered to vote.
Registered to vote as well.
Okay. And then, and maybe I'm self-serving, I don't see any role for the mayor in this process. And it seems like that and I don't know what it is, but it seems like I have 1 or 2 appointments, don't I?
The mayor appoints the Housing Authority and the Urban Renewal Authority board members, but it's ratified by city council.
Okay.
It's the council districts. What's that? And council liaisons to different outside agencies.
Okay. I would argue that the mayor's got a role in this, that particularly in at-large appointments, all of the council members are appointed by district. The mayor's the only elected official other than the clerk and the treasurer that are appointed by the city at large. So just something like that. You also, and also just a minor thing is that we're talking about any board and commission member may be removed from office by council after a public hearing before the council by majority vote, to clarify whether that's a majority vote of the whole council or only the majority vote of the council voting on that particular item.
And this is currently in code, I believe, this procedure. Yeah, and we had to clean up certain sections of the code in other areas to address that. So we'll look at that piece.
Okay, and Councilor Hulteen was next.
Thank you. A couple of just like higher level that touch a few of these. One is, especially where we're looking at term limits, at what point are we enacting that? And are they retroactive? So like if someone's seated right now and has served 3 terms and we adopt this, do they serve an additional 3 terms? Like at what point are we enforcing like the 3-term limit? Is it when we adopt this, if you're on your 3rd term, then you are limited? Or does the term count start when we adopt the code amendment?
So staff's recommendations is that we start counting in March, which is typically when new board members would be sworn in. So anything that has happened before wouldn't count. We would start counting in March, using the midterm appointment policy to determine if you're in the middle of your term, whether or not that counts as a full term or no term.
Okay, so we could have people who could be 18-year tenure still under this, like in theory. Okay, I think that clarification is just important for folks. Then I 100% agree with the mayor. That was one of my points, is that mayors should do at large, because I don't know how we would do thoughtful balance of trying to circulate across districts. And I also agree on the unexcused absence being too rigorous. And correct me if I'm wrong, all of these boards have a chair, don't they? A chair and a staff liaison?
Chair and a vice chair.
Yeah. So I think for the non-quasi-judicial, so, you know, I think if absenteeism is an issue, then the chair could talk to their staff liaison. And could it come to council as a recommendation that we have this seat where the absenteeism is affecting the board, and then the council could relieve that person instead of having a policy that has some crisp edges? Could it be at the discretion of the chair and the staff liaison to identify the absenteeism has created a problem, and then that comes to council for council to
Might make it a little more awkward for that chair and staff liaison not to have a rule in place, and I'm not sure if you guys want to have to make that decision either, coming to you, but.
Okay. All right, I think those are my, And I guess if I were to say if there was one I really wanted to talk about, I have a lot of concerns about the liaison recommendations from staff. That would be one I definitely want to discuss a little bit more. And I'm not clear if we're doing that now or if we're going through them
Okay.
later.
Counselor Hoppy and I had my say, so you're free to move forward.
Great, thanks. I'd like to ask for a consensus to move forward with the staff recommendation on the following items. And if it's an item that I missed, that somebody wants to have more conversation about, just shake your head no at me when I read them. Item 1, item 2, you want to talk about 1? Okay. Consensus for the following items. Item 2, item 3, item 5, item 8. Item 12, item 13. Do you have consensus to move forward with staff recommendations on those items?
Read those.
Leah, did I get you all?
Yeah, 2, 3, 5, 8, 12, and 13. Do we want to pull 5 so Ms. Dosman can ask a question?
Yeah, so with 5, it just, so it would be allowing,
She pulled that one. Leah asked a question.
so just a standard term. So do you need clarification or direction on how long that term is? Okay, so that's, all right, that's why I want to talk about that. Thank you.
Okay, and you had questions about 1. So 2, 3, 5, 8, 12, and 13. I think we had consensus from everybody. Leah's okay now too, so.
So that would leave item 1, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11 for further discussion.
And if I could add, Mayor, I think is your request that there might be a recommendation to add to the code specifically that the mayor makes all at-large appointments.
We could have that. Do we have a consensus around that? We do. Thank you. Well, then let's put it in law. I can't get any weaker than I am. Okay, do you want to, so we're looking at 1, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11.
Yes.
Any desire to prioritize those for discussion? Okay, number 1. Ms. Dosman.
So I think I would be okay with either 3 2-year terms or 2 3-year terms to equal a total of 6, and whatever we want to do as far as that cooling off period. So I think my preference would be a 3-term limit of 2 years. But they said that the memo indicated that there were some that are 3 years and some that are 2 years, correct?
All of them are 3 years, except for the election commission, which serves a 2-year term to line up with the cycle of the election.
Okay, and is that still necessary? Like, I'm guessing that's necessary because we want to maintain that kind of cycle for the.
If the council wanted to change it to 2-year terms for all our boards, that is an option.
Okay.
Were you asking about the election commission?
I was asking about the election commission.
I don't know.
but-
I don't know if that's, I've been thinking about that one. I don't know if it's necessarily aligns with the, I don't know.
Is that an even year appointment or an odd year appointment?
I think we appoint after every election, if I remember.
So it would be a.
Can we just say 6
even
years?
ye- No, it'd be an odd year election, or a an even year.
Can we just say
appointment,
6 years, then the 2 years can stay 2 years and the 3 years can stay 3 years? So we
That's
put the
fine.
limit at
That's fine.
6 years, because I would agree with that, but that way we don't have to, because I think less than a 3-year appointment for, sorry.
All
I
of
was
them is challenging. Yeah.
Ms. Hoppy?
I guess I would say that the 9 years aligns a little bit more like with like also an elected official, because if you're elected for 2 terms in a row, you have 8 years. And so I mean, I'm not going to die on this hill, but I really think the 3 years and 3 terms is perfectly fine too. So I'll go with whatever the majority wants.
Counselor Stites?
It's not a hill I'm going to die on either, but I also like 3 years and 3 terms. I think 9 years, it's not that long for some of these boards to do, and if we were coming from a position where we were turning people away at every time, but to be doing this more often and cutting out more people, I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense. So I like it the way it is.
Counselor Hulteen?
Thank you. I definitely think it has to be 3-year terms. I mean, just recruitment starts to get hard if we're like having to go recruit people every 2 years for them. I do believe that the more turnover on the boards is actually going to generate more interest in the boards. I do know some people walk away from being on the boards because they feel disenfranchised because they're such an entrenched group of people, been there for so long. So I'm not going to die on this hill either, but I would say I would lean towards the 2 3-year terms. I think that's enough time for somebody to come on, understand the scope of the work, deepen the relationships, get into a leadership position, be in leadership position, and then stay on for a year to support the leader behind them, which is, I think, something I think about a lot with this stuff. And you can do that, I think, really gracefully in 2 years. And then that person can go serve on another commission too. But I think one of the things we've talked about is really wanting to create these opportunities. And we heard we're getting unprecedented interest. Wheat Ridge 101 and 102 forthcoming is really, I think, leading into that. So if I'm not going to die on the hill, but I would lean towards 2 3-year terms.
Counselor Ohm?
Thank you, Mayor. I would lean towards the 3-year terms. Having had that, been on the planning commission, keep in mind that any board or commission member serves at the pleasure of city council. So after every 3 years, they go up to re-up, for that. And if council thinks that they're done at 6, then they're done. They don't get renewed. There's nothing automatic about it. But they serve at the pleasure of city council. Thank you.
Counselor Weaver?
I could honestly go either way on this one. I just wanted to clarify. I do really agree with Counselor Ohm in that they do serve at the behest of the council, and we have removed people, and that's just how it goes. So if there's a problem with any of these things, we can always remove people, and I think that's something that we should probably take more seriously than we do, because it shouldn't necessarily be at staff's trouble to get rid of some of these people. If we're hearing from chairs, we should be removing people, because we do have the right to do that at any time, correct? Or just at renewal? Pardon?
You have the right to remove someone after a hearing by majority vote for the specific reasons that were mentioned in the presentation.
Okay. But if they want another term, to Mr. Ohm's point, we could not renew it and we could install a new person. And I think we should take that more seriously as a thought. On the other side, rather than saying 2 3-year appointments, since we have 2-year appointments and 3-year appointments, my point was that I was trying to say before was that just call it 6 years, because then it allows 3-year appointments and 2-year appointments in these various committees that we have.
Let me ask a question. Do we regularly, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just respond to a staff concern with basing it on the number of years. So right now with a lot of our boards and commissions, we have staggering of appointments so that turnover comes at a consistent pace. So if we do it based on the number of years, that can mess with the staggering. Not to say that you can't do it, just that the council should consider that if they would like to base it on the number of years.
I had a question. Do we regularly get a report back on boards and commissions, sort of an annual report?
On what they've been doing and stuff, or
what they did, how they're, and including sort of membership at their meetings and how that, so that we have some.
No, we do not.
Data points.
We don't on membership. I think that's tracked. I think absences and such by each of the chairs. Well, it's inconsistent. Sounds like it's inconsistent. But no, the short answer is no. We don't have a regular feedback loop to city council. Something we could do though.
Okay. Councilor Stites?
I like that, what you're going with that, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if maybe we could add on to that, maybe a yearly where the boards and commissions come and present to council, like a study session, what they've done for that year. Can I get a consensus that maybe we add that on as a number 14? And absence information, whatever information we need can come from that board that night. Okay.
And Councilor Gozman?
Thank you. So just a clarifying question in regards to, so if we do a three-year term, then, and we say we don't have that person serve their third term, they wouldn't need that cooling off period then? They could turn around and either reapply the very next year, correct? Because they haven't served the 3 consecutive terms?
That's correct.
Okay, or they could go and serve on other boards and commissions if they so
Yes.
choose and are appointed. Okay.
Councilor Hoppe?
Can I just clarify that we are talking about the years and the term limits, but it doesn't actually apply to the Elections Commission, or does it apply to the Elections Commission?
The staff recommendation is to apply the term limits to the Election Commission.
Okay. And then, we have a tool in here where here's the thing, Elections Commission, like nobody really ever wants to do it, so it's why it's the same 2 people always. Nobody applies for that. But we also have a tool in here where if no applicant has applied, then they can continue to. So with that in mind, I'm going to try to make a consensus that we have our term limits are 3 years long, and our term served is 3 years, and the limit is a total of 2 years, or 2 terms. So it would be 6 total. A term is 3 years, you can serve 2. 2 terms of 3 years. So I'm going to ask for a consensus for it to be 3-year terms for 2 terms, and then you're limited. They're the same.
Can you repeat that?
Sorry.
I'm just asking for a consensus to have our terms be 3 years and be limited at 2 terms. Judy, are you okay with that?
2 3-year terms.
It's 6 total. No, there's only 3-year terms now. Yep. 2 terms, 6 years total.
This is for everything but the Election Commission? Election too? I think we need to verify if that's not in the charter. Is it their term limits? Do we remember?
There are no term limits in the charter.
Okay.
Yes.
We did. We reached a consensus to have
2 3-year terms.
our terms are considered 3 years long, and you can serve 2 before you're limited.
Well, are you asking if it was unanimous?
It was not unanimous.
And I had a question then. In that scenario then, if there was no other qualified candidates at the end of that term limit, would the you'd still be term limited and not able to serve, and we would just have a vacancy in the board?
Well, actually, item 4 is when we're talking about, like, if there are no other qualified candidates, but we are looking to add a tool that says can still be, if there's no other qualified candidates, then you can be reappointed for your seat.
And there was consensus on item number 3.
With the next item that we didn't have consensus on was item 4, which should be up for discussion
Yeah,
now.
number 3, though, there was consensus, and that talks about the extended term length.
Okay. So are we now at item number 4?
Yes.
Could I clarify real quick? We're not changing the term length of the election commission, right? Still 2-year terms?
No.
We are.
We are, okay. So everything is on 3-year terms?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. 2 3-year terms. Should we redo that consensus? There seems to be some confusion.
Currently, let me just clarify, currently the election commission is every 2 years. With people with the only 2 people who ever want to do it. And so we have already consented item 3, which means that an extended term can be at will with reappointment required at the end of a standard length term if there's no other qualified candidates that have applied for it. So the election commission we're not running into trouble in 6 years being out of election commission committee. And it's 2 years to align with the elections, but it doesn't necessarily have to be every 2 years to align with the elections. So consensus to have our terms be 3 years for a total of 2 before you're termed out for that specific board, and then you have to have a cooling off period. Judy?
4.
Yep.
5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a consensus. Councilor Hulteen?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to a question on an item we had previous consensus on. So item 13. And I'm asking this to ask if maybe we need to bring it back out. So there we had a consensus that council will make all appointments as Sustainable Wheat Ridge. So as the committee is seated right now, it's all at large. So do we need to figure out what the composition of that committee is? Because right now it's all at large, and if we're going to be doing council appointments, then it's a distributed council representation and some at large. So do we need to have a discussion about that, or is that something staff could bring back, a recommended, or something we could talk about at Sustainable Wheat Ridge? But like that, I mean, just I'm calling out that actually is going to impact the composition of that committee. I'm still very supportive of it, but it's just a technicality we need to give some attention to, especially if there's going to be some at-large ones that the mayor gets to appoint.
Well, I would think it would bear some more thought and some more study, quite frankly.
Under what you've already decided, yeah, the mayor would make the appointments. They're all at large, and they would come back to council for consensus, unless you want to change it.
I guess my thought on that is, and I don't know how this impacts the race and equity, but with Sustainable Wheat Ridge, I mean, it seems like some distributed representation across council, but I mean, this is kind of not in the study packet. It may be something we need to think about a little bit there, but.
Can we bring that forward to a future study session, maybe?
Yeah, I would think so.
I think so. So
I'll support that if you want to bring that forward, and we can do that.
Yeah, I think for that one, we should probably have a discussion about that. So, so I'm going to revise the consensus for item number 13. Consensus to adopt the committee member appointment policy as presented by staff as with the exception of Sustainable Wheat Ridge, coming back to council for discussion.
So thank you for bringing that up, because I would like, if we are going to adopt a race and equity advisory committee, and it's going to be structured the same way as Sustainable Wheat Ridge. I want to have that conversation as well, because I would like to have council representation as well as at large. So I'd prefer it to be a hybrid model. So I think that's worth having a discussion in regards to
We do
both
have
of
that
those.
discussion on for tonight, and we get to decide how we're going to form that board on the next item.
Yeah, I just, because
For that one.
they're coupled together in item 13, so I think that's
Would
what's
it be
confusing.
helpful to do it for all of our committees, so Active Adult Committee?
I was just going to say, maybe we could take a look at all those committees and
Have a
and
larger
look at
committee discussion?
Are
Would
they
that be
all,
helpful?
are
I think-
all those committees at large?
Yeah,
Well, it depends, and item number 13 covers a lot of different types of groups and committees. The Lutheran campus planning effort, the 44th Avenue planning effort, a lot of those, we picked more technical type folks. So, yeah, we don't have a full list of current committees. They come and go. I think Sustainable Wheat Ridge and Race and Equity and Senior Advisory are probably the 3 standing ones right now. In the
The PD, maybe?
PD
Community
Advisory,
Group is standing.
standing.
Community, what the Community Partner Grant Program is.
We could bring back that whole group to a whole separate study session.
I think
Some
I
of
would,
these-
I would support that.
Some of these seem to be more like, originated more as task force type
Yes.
functionality anyway, so.
They are. Some are definite period of time, some aren't.
Right.
I would support it coming back to study session because it's kind of the evolution of Sustainable Wheat Ridge, like how it was initiated is a little bit different than its function now.
Yeah.
And I think its a current charter is actually kind of constraining some of its advisory capacity. So I think those at-large committees, it would be good to bring those back for a study session on reviewing for district representation appointment.
We have consensus on that?
Yeah. Well, we don't need one, but we'll do that.
So essentially, we're removing 13 from the approval of the first consensus.
Yeah.
And bring back for a study session. Okay.
Moving right along. Go ahead, Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For item 4, I would like to suggest that it says consensus to allow board members to serve extended terms indefinitely. And I would just like the language to be a little cleaner, until a qualified applicant can be appointed.
Yes, that is staff's intent with the recommendation.
Then I'm good with that. Does anybody else have any discussion about item 4? Do we have consensus to move forward with item 4? Thank you.
Okay, let's go to item 6. Mrs. Hoppy?
Thank you. I agree with what Councilwoman Holteen was saying earlier about if we could have some sort of, item 6 is serving on multiple boards at once. And I personally prefer that you do not serve on 2 boards simultaneously. You can serve on our or on our boards and commissions and our authorities. That's 2 serves there. However, I agree with Councilwoman Holteen when she says that sometimes when we have things like task forces and special projects, that we should try to figure out some sort of carve out to be able to allow that, and not have that be considered serving on another board or commission. So I don't know how that language works.
So that is, serving on a task force or a committee is not considered a multiple board in terms of the code. The multiple board appointment policy only refers to bodies that are specifically called boards or commissions.
I support that.
So yeah, that addresses that concern.
So with that information, I'd like to ask for consensus to take no action and prevent board meeting members from serving on multiple boards at once, excluding the Elections Commission.
Okay. You got number 3 on that?
Yes.
Okay. Moving right along. So number 7.
I'll go ahead and.
Councilor Hulteen?
Yep, thank you. So on this, a couple of things stand out for me. One is, I'm not going to get too specific with this, but we had a circumstance in the last year and a half where there was an out-of-district potential appointment to a board, and the potential appointee lived in District 2, and the appointment was going to be done by District 1 because that's where the open seat was. And it turns out, as representatives of the district, we knew things about this applicant that made us believe he would not be a good representative on any board. And we were able to share that information with our District 1 colleagues. And I think that's the kind of thing that just doesn't come through in an application. And so I think the staff, and it's not a underappreciation for staff's expertise and being able to look through these applications and pull out, these are qualities and things that are important. I would very much welcome, if staff had recommendations in general when we're looking at planning commission. These are qualities in a planning commission application that staff would really recognize as valuable. I mean, if there's a general guide for each of the boards and commissions around these are the kind of attributes or experience or qualities, or that would be really welcome. I also think it gets really confusing if we're going to be opening up our applications where people can mark that they're interested in 6 different boards. And that's going to create some really interesting 3-dimensional chess amongst us to try and figure out who's going to get appointed to which positions when we have multiple applicants. And I think the staff liaisons or the staff recommendations would complicate that even further. So I would very much welcome guidance from staff on, qualities and characteristics, but I think it would put us in a position of having to, not take the staff recommendations and have a discussion about that. And I think that council appointments are around those kind of understanding, who the people are, outside of their applications also. So in that sense, I think that the recommendations would make things more complicated and would maybe put us in a position to have to explain why we're not taking them in ways that maybe we don't want to have to do that. So I would suggest that we do not have the staff recommendations.
We'll go to Councilor Stites and then Councilor Hoppe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I agree with Councilor Hulteen on this. I think that makes for an awkward moment on the dais when you have to go against what the staff recommended and maybe give a reason why, especially if it's something that might be, because you're essentially at that point talking about personnel decisions very publicly. While I do think it's nice to have the staff liaison make those recommendations, maybe that's not a formal recommendation. Maybe that's a conversation or something like that. That if I'm looking to appoint somebody in District 3, maybe I need to have a conversation, and there's people and I just can't decide that. That's a conversation I can have offline and make that decision on my own. So I would support taking the no action on that.
I've got Councilor Hoppe and then Councilor Rome.
I agree with my fellow council members. I support taking no action on that. I do know that as a staff liaison, if you're like, man, we really need someone who has some education background on this board, and the application process is open, then I think absolutely have your chair send council an email that says, can you look for somebody with education background, or email the city council saying we're looking for somebody with an education background. Because also when we're appointing in different districts, maybe some of the people who have applied for that seat in District 1 don't have an educational background, but maybe somebody in District 4 does. And so if that goes out to council, then I can be like, D4 looks like you're the one that's got, those skill sets in your applicants. So I suggest taking no action also.
Councilor,
May I make a quick comment,
Well,
Mr.
you
Mayor?
may.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a little piece of the intent of us bringing that to you for discussion actually had a lot to do also with potential removal of members, or at least seeing if you're open to staff letting you know, perhaps in that informal way that you described, when perhaps an applicant has really been struggling to meet the commitments of the board and commission. So perhaps consider that as to whether or not you might be open to that kind of feedback from the staff liaison that perhaps another member of the commission might not be comfortable in sharing.
Councilor Ohm.
I think you just read my mind. One thing that I would like is I definitely would like some staff feedback, not necessarily a recommendation, but there's going to be times when you might have some insight on a particular candidate that, you know, they could check the boxes and they meet all the criteria and everything looks good on paper, but, you know, it's like, you know, by the way, this has happened. It might be something with, you know, could be short-term rentals, could be anything that maybe I just am not aware of, and I would find that information insightful as we're choosing candidates. Thank you.
Councilor Stites and Councilor Hulteen. Councilor Hulteen, or
I'm not Counselor Hulteen.
Councilor Weaver then.
Okay. I can't, my age, I just lost it.
Gets worse.
Somebody else talking.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask for a consensus, but I'm going to ask for a consensus on number 2, take no action, but with an understanding that there are times when staff and board chairs have important information for us, and that we welcome that to be communicated, just not in the official staff packet, but rather in appropriate ways to help us be informed on making the best decision. And so with that, I'd like to ask for a consensus to take no action on having staff liaison recommendations.
So that would be number 2 on item 7.
Correct.
You may now.
I remembered what I wanted to say. To the point that we were talking about of knowing a little bit more about what's happening on these committees, I'd also like to know that the leadership is consistent among all of them, because I feel like, I think it's a lot better in more recent years, but being on one board or commission is very, very different than being on another board or commission on how it's run. Some are more loosey-goosey, some are more very consistent, and I think that's part of the feedback of finding good fits for our constituents as well, because I think sometimes it's a bad fit for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and along those lines, I know that Cole, when we were talking about this a lot, there's going to be some training that's going to be necessary for staff liaisons, and I would like some of that training to be to encompass things like the calendar reminders, that the memos are professionally done, that it's not your agenda with one attachment and then a week later you get, oh, here's another attachment, and the day of, oh, here's another attachment, right, which does happen in some of our committees. So along with the training, if we could, to what Amanda was saying, let's bring it to a more professional level, and the level that we receive our packets at should be the level that our other boards get.
Thank you. And so I think the annual report on boards and commissions will go a long way as to maybe addressing some of those concerns that we might have, and then we can kind of go from there. Thank you.
Sorry, these are all a little bit sort of tangential, but yeah. But one of the things that I think is important with that is timely posting of agendas and minutes and getting them also up on our archives. Like, we have an open urban renewal position in District 2, and I am very excited. We have a very good candidate. And when I was talking to her about it, I went in to go find sort of recent minutes so I could talk intelligently about it, and it was a little bit hard to find. So as part of this whole refresh and that, like, recognizing that that information is important for people who are considering.
So I think kind of 9 and 10 go together for me. And so we touched on it a little bit at the beginning of this conversation. And while I understand that unexpected things happen and one or two people's absence regularly may not affect the function of the meeting, but I think when you decide to be on a board or commission or city council or various other things in a serving capacity, that comes with an expectation of attendance, and that's carrying out the duties that you agreed to when joining a board and commission. And so I agree that maybe the 2 unexcused may be a little too rigorous, but I also had some questions about like how many excused absences are we going to allow before it becomes an unexcused absence? Because I think inconsistency in showing up, it doesn't have a good look for the city, and it's hard for those members to be, informed of what's going on and maintain the relationships for the board and commission, and then be able to adequately vote and determine and carry out decisions. So I guess I just want to talk to my colleagues about that.
I want to have all the empathy in the world for the issue that we've been talking about with excused versus unexcused absence. I don't think it's as hard as we're making it, though. Just as a person who's taught all of her life, absences are excused or they're not excused. And there's a conversation that happens, and I would say that that's something that we move to the chair's ability to report to us back on, because just like if I'm the teacher and I know what's going on with a student, I can better make a decision about whether that's an excused or an unexcused absence because the parent and everything else are involved. And I feel like for us to try and make an arbitrary decision about what excused versus unexcused is without sort of having that consistency, like we just talked about with the previous question with the chair, and saying, okay, maybe there's a situation we don't understand. So I don't know if we can come up with a number, but I do feel like it's something we should shift to the chair, that the chair either brings to us or we give the chair the ability to say, yeah, there have been too many unexcused absences, and it's being recorded in some way.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify a little bit too. When Cole and I first initially talked about this, I was like, oof, that's harsh. But then, an unexcused absence is a no call, no show, no return contact. That's unexcused, right? And then if a month later we go, oh, that person was in a car accident, right? Then it becomes an excused absence. Also, if, let's say, they have to, here was the example I had. If you have a member who sits on your board, who when they're there, they're an extremely effective person, but maybe, they haven't shown up a couple of times, but it's due to circumstances that are not just, well, I'm just not coming, right? Then you kind of want to keep that member on your board, right? And so that's why those would be considered excused absences. But also, if it gets to a point where it's like, oh, there's 2 unexcused absences, the first point that goes to is that board. So the board then votes on if they believe that those absences, if they want to make one of those absences an excused absence, right? And maintain their member. And then also along with that would go a conversation probably with the chair and the vice chair. And so I think really whether it's 2 or 3 unexcused absences, it really doesn't matter because we have all these other layers in place. So yeah, so 2 no call, no show, no contacts puts you in a position where the board liaison can recommend recommend to council removal of that board member, and then council makes that vote, and it has to be by a majority vote to remove that member. So still ultimately, city council still ultimately has the end say.
Councilor Dozeman.
So from what I was hearing, it's kind of a mechanism in regards to those members that you're just not hearing from and aren't showing up and you can't really wrangle, correct? I mean, because I think that that's what needs to be addressed here, right?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. We had a really tough one. I'm looking at Lauren Mikulak sitting in the back where it took, I mean, we just didn't really know what to do. The code gives us the provision right now to bring it to you all for public hearing. We didn't even have any information to bring you for a public hearing on this particular issue, other than we haven't heard from this member in a while and we heard a rumor that she left the state. Right? Like it was really awkward, you know, for us to try and determine what to do. So it was a Board of Adjustment, I believe. So we just sort of waited for the clock to run out. But it really isn't it's not really helping anybody right now the way the code's written. So yes, exactly. It's dealing with those situations in a more, I would say, defined process.
Manner.
Yeah.
So how is attendance captured generally?
The best answer is not really.
So can we put a process in place so that it is?
Yes, that is going to be part of some of the staff liaison training that is going to be implemented between now and March, when we're going to start really trying to put these policies into play.
Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I think what I'm hearing from Councilmember Hoppe is that, and what I had the most grievance was the automatic of, like, you know, you have 2 unexcused, automatically you're done. That's it. I do feel a little more comfortable that there's a process of, you know, there's 2, and now we're going to have a discussion. It's going to go before the city council. You know, whether the number's 2 or 3, I'm a little more comfortable that it's just not automatic, because things do happen, you know, like you said, a car accident or something. So that's my thought on it. Thank you.
Councilor Stites.
Yeah, I was going to ask for a consensus that we go with number 1 on number 9. Are we good with that? Number 1 on number 9? And I'm going to go with the magic. We keep it at number 2, the way it is. Recommended 2 unexcused absences for number 10.
Okay, so on number 10, we're going to a consensus on the second item to automatically dismiss a board member with 2 unexcused absences in a year.
Just to clarify, what I heard was a little bit different than this recommendation.
Well, I guess it would be a little bit, it would be with it would come to the liaison and the board chair, right?
So sort of consensus to investigate, or?
To schedule a hearing with council?
Schedule a hearing, or I guess if they have 2 unexcused absences, it's going to go to the board chair and the liaison because you can take the unexcused absences off, right? You can turn those into excused absences. So they would be able to appeal it.
Yes,
through the board.
with number 2 and the recommendation as it currently is, if you get those 2 unexcused absences, you would be automatically removed. But you would have the option to appeal that to your board, who could vote by majority to make one of those an excused absence.
Yeah. I mean, I personally still say we go with that, so I'm with number 2, so.
Okay, looks like we have consensus on that.
Did
so
we
that-
get a consensus on item number 9?
Number 9
Number
is
9, we want.
with,
Did everybody raise hands?
number
Okay.
1, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So then on item number 10, a consensus, but to sort of appeal to the board for a review of the situation.
I think, Mayor, if I may, I'd like
Yes.
clarification on that too, because I think,
Good.
Cole, is this what you were asking? You heard council say, but council wants the final vote, which is different than how this is written.
That is what I heard, yes.
Okay.
And so my understanding of the clarification was council was okay with leaving that appeal at a board level.
I mean, I personally don't want to be the attendance police for all of our boards and commissions. And I feel like if it's a big enough problem on the board and commission, it should be handled on the board and commission. And if they need to get rid of that member and then I need to go find that a new member, that's on me. But if they want to get rid of that member because they're not showing up, that's on that liaison, that staff member, and that.
I think why it originally came back to council is because you appoint them, but I guess if council sets the rule that you're giving your authority to the chair, the boards to make that decision for you, I think that's fine.
I think as long as we're all on the same page,
Yes.
that's what we're saying here, is to
Yes.
go with this consensus, which is with the provisions that Cole has described,
It's not automatic, though.
but it also isn't coming back for a council vote
Correct.
to dismiss.
yes.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you. I just want to make sure, yeah.
Just to be clear, the recommendation isn't automatic removal, but that board can essentially vote to put that person back in
Right.
by a majority vote of their membership, excluding the automatically removed board member.
Yes,
So it has to come back to that board to make the final decision.
to the board, not to the
that board,
council.
but not
Yes.
to council, yes. Yes,
Yes.
I think we're all saying that we don't want to be in
Yes.
charge of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and
I
they
was
don't.
the one that was confused, sorry.
Yes, and the board doesn't have to take that vote if they don't want to. It's up to the board.
Yeah.
And once again, that would be a majority of all of the members of the board, or the members of the board at that meeting voting on that issue?
That one would be all the members in the board, excluding that removed one.
She can't hear you.
Sorry, I thought I had my microphone on. It sounds like a slightly different consensus than we came to, because the automatic dismissal of the board member with 2 unexcused absences sounds a little bit different than a process that a board chair could elect to initiate. It sounds like what we're talking about is a trigger. Once there are 2 unexcused absences, then the board chair may elect to dismiss that person. Is
Counselor Hoppy?
that what we're saying?
Yeah, so it's like, so if there's 2 unexcused absences and you're like, all right, Janice, go kick rocks, I can say, oh, but wait, I would like to ask for an appeal to the board. So then it goes to that board, and I say, okay, yeah, sorry, it's considered an unexcused absence, but, this is what happened. I was in a car accident, and I was in a coma for a month, and here I am awake again, and I'd like to still be an active part of this board. Then the board can say, oh, well, that's now an excused absence, so you're no longer automatically removed if they vote by majority to do that. Then because of that, because there's only now 1 unexcused absence, then that person is then placed back onto the board.
So it's basically number 2 with an appeal right of that board member.
It's spelled out exactly how it should be in number 2. Yeah. Yeah. We agree that there should be an appeals process, but they should automatically, I don't think it should be up to the board chair to initiate the process. The process should be automatically initiated at the second.
If requested for an appeal, right?
Yeah, but they're automatically kicked off on the second unexcused. They can then come
But
back.
with an appeal process.
But they can,
yeah.
yes, but with an appeal process.
Yeah, and that's-
But number 2 is right, but with an appeals process.
With an appeal process,
Yes.
yeah. Yep.
Do we need to get another consensus on that, or are we good on that? We're good.
Counselor
Just-
Levine?
I don't think this needs to come into the consensus, but it triggers just a whole bunch of things around like waiting period, if there's an appeals process, waiting period for like reposting the position, and just a cascade of things that we need to be mindful of, yeah.
And I guess just as a comment on all of these things, staff is going to go back and get the actual language that we're looking at in here, so we're going to have a review period so that we wordsmith it.
Yes, this will be, these code amendments will be made by ordinance, which means you will see this 2 more times in the writing of the language, which will be put into the code before it is adopted.
Okay. Moving on. Item number 11. Well, this has to do with the city manager's powers.
There's questions about that one?
Deep question.
Somebody had a question about that one?
Okay,
Oh,
Counselor
sorry.
Hoppy.
I didn't actually have a question about that one, but like, I agree with item 1. I think that part of that was, part of the suggestion was that Councilwoman Hulteen was thinking maybe that mayor should be able to do that, but we've already made that with a different consensus. So at this point, unless anybody else had any questions on that, I'd like to ask for consensus on item 11 to go with staff recommendation of number 1.
Council.
Good. That consensus.
All right, so that's not council, that's staff?
No. It'd be an at-large position, so you'll
Okay.
be selecting that position.
The mayor, huh?
Yeah, there you go. Give you something to do.
Hey, that's pretty good. Thank you.
It
Okay.
ends the debate of the city manager going, wait, what? I get an appointment? And then the liaison going, no, that doesn't happen, and us having to check the code again. Thank you.
We're going to get the city manager an appointment with his dentist. You know, we were on 11, and it looked to me like we had 12 and 13 dispatched.
Yes.
Counselor Hulteen and then Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you. So, sorry, Cole, I did not open with a thank you for all your hard work on this. And like Ms. Hoppy, this was, yeah, game-changing. One more little comment I had on here, as we're doing this sort of like revisiting it and trying to bring things into alignment, I really like, we generally have most of our boards and commissions on the same schedule for applications and appointments. There are some outliers, and I think bringing everything into the same season is really good so that we can do that, big civic push out to everybody and program that a little bit better. We will always have the, midterm appointments that kind of linger around, but I really like the idea as we do this refresh. What are the adjustments we need to do to bring all the boards and commissions into the same, like, March renewal? So.
And I had sort of one other thought, that when we get some more feedback on what you're doing, can we get sort of a chart of all the boards and commissions by not name membership, but positions, District 1, and where we're still staggering terms, right? Yeah. And so how the staggering will happen, so that we get a feel for how many people and positions and support that we're seeking in our community.
Yeah, and actually, Mayor, there's a couple that kind of got a little off kilter, to be honest. We noticed in the last round of appointments, there are some boards that have more at 1 year than others. It's
Okay.
just sort of happened over this. So this might be a good opportunity in this next March to reset.
Yeah, I think we're sort of looking at a reset, and I don't know
Yep.
that we'll get it all done in 1 year, but if you get it mostly along the way.
Yep,
Okay.
that's the goal.
Counselor Dozman.
Something else that is addressed is the application process. Do you have any idea as to what kind of changes that process will, or the application itself will undertake?
So the change that we informed the council that we plan to make with the application was to allow someone to select all of the boards that they would like to serve on with their preferences. That way, for example, we have this code amendment and council agrees with it that you can't serve on multiple boards or commissions at once. Well, if someone wanted to sit on the Planning Commission and the Parks and Recreation Commission, there's a seat open for both. They would be able to select, I want to do this one and this one, but I want to do Parks and Rec more than the other one. That's the change that we're planning on making to that application.
Just a minute before I go to you. Is it possible to put the name first? The applicant's name at the top of the application, or?
Yes, we can definitely put the applicant's name at the top of the application page. That is something we've heard, is that when going through those hundreds of application pages, that it can get a little bit messy and a little bit confusing. So we plan to put the name of the person right on the top of every page. That way you know who you're looking at.
Excellent. Counselor Hoppy.
I just wanted to ask for clarification and make sure that we have moved item 13 to a future study session.
We did. We got consensus to move that, yes.
All right. Additional discussion? No? All right, if there's no more discussion, I suggest that we take a break here. I'll be back around 9 o'clock or so, if that's enough time. Thank you. Thank you. That concludes our second item on tonight's agenda. We'll go now to item number 3, which is creating a diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused advisory committee. And Cole, looks like you're on the hot seat again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. New. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to be able to present to you and the council on this topic tonight. Let's get started by going over our presentation agenda. We're going to start with the background, the why we got here, why we're discussing it, before we move into staff's recommendations on a scope of work and budget, structure, possible committee names, and a timeline to establish a diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused advisory committee for the council. And then we'll come to an end of this presentation. So with our background, let's start with the Race and Equity Task Force, which was formed in February 2021. They were assigned to complete several tasks with the goal to make Wheat Ridge a more inclusive and responsive community. At the April 3rd, 2023 council study session, they completed their assignment when they delivered a recommendation report including over 100 recommendations to make Wheat Ridge more inclusive and responsive. Council accepted this recommendation report in addition to the recommendation to create an advisory committee to continue the work of the task force, which was disbanded after that meeting. Staff has researched several similarly focused advisory committees in the state and in the nation, and as a result has prepared recommendations for the council to consider when establishing this advisory committee. The staff is making some recommendations pertaining to the scope, and they're summarized on the presentation there, but I would like to read out all of the things that we are recommending that this advisory committee do. So I will do that briefly. We are recommending that they advise the city council on policies and practices to make Wheat Ridge a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. That they advise the city council on the implementation of the 2023 Race and Equity Task Force recommendation report. That they act as a liaison between the community and the city council to bring forward issues and solutions related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the city. That they organize events and activities that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that they promote diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to the community. And finally, that they work to foster mutual respect and understanding of all persons. Because of the focus on organizing events and activities, we are recommending that this committee have a $10,000 budget for those activities, and that budget would be established in 2024. We are recommending that this committee consist of 10 at-large members appointed by the city council, but based on the consensus that was provided before, we would change that to 10 at-large members appointed by the mayor. With a preference for persons with experience working on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, or persons with lived experience. We also recommend that this committee adopt the policies established for other boards and commissions, like term limits and unexcused absences that council just reached consensus on. And that in addition to the 10 at-large members, there be one non-voting council liaison appointed by the mayor and limited to serving a 2-year term, with the primary responsibility of facilitating communication between the city council and the committee. Next, we have some possible committee names for you to consider, and I'll read through them all briefly. First, we have the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, or JEDI Committee. Then we have the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI Committee. The Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advancement IDEA Committee. The Committee for Advancing Race and Equity, CARE. The Race and Equity Committee, REC. And the Human Relations Committee, HRC. Finally, we are recommending the following timeline: that we begin to accept applications for this committee by fall 2023, with the goal of appointing members by early 2024. That brings us to the end of my presentation. Again, we are asking for council consensus on the scope of the committee's activities, its accompanying 2024 budget amount, the structure of committee, the membership number, its rules, at-large appointments, whether or not there be a council liaison, the name of committee, and a timeline to establish this committee. That is the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'll hand this meeting back over to the mayor.
Thank you. Discussion on item number 3. Councillor Hoppy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess for me, I'm okay with the budget. Sounds great. I'm leaning a little more towards like the title being like number 3, 4, or 6. But the one thing that the mayor appointed non-voting council liaison I agree with. The scope I agree with. The only thing is the appointment. The hard thing is for this type of committee, just much like the sustainable committee, is that there's some definite, like very specific, like on the sustainability committee, we have people that work in sustainability, and it may be, there might be more of those in one district than another district, and so it's really hard to say, to have specific district representation on these very 2 specific committees that we have. And so I don't know how we do that. While I do believe that the mayor should have some at-large appointments on both of those committees, I think that as city council, we should also be able to have some appointments on those committees. So I'm not really sure how do we work that little bug out that we've given ourselves from our consensus from earlier. You know, so that's a bug, but we also have that coming as a future study session, so I'm not going to super dwell on it. I just want to put it out there that the way that happens will potentially be changing.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I'm good with the 10, with the size, and with it adhering to all the other rules. But the one thing that I also have a question on is, I think that this type of committee, along with the sustainability committee, is the type where you shouldn't necessarily have to be a citizen of Wheat Ridge to be on it, because again, there's some very specific skill sets that that someone who maybe either works in Wheat Ridge or educates in Wheat Ridge or is like maybe they're with Xcel Energy, and so so they would go with the, like they would work with the sustainability committee, right? Something like that. So so I just am not sure how, because what we had looked at in our memo before, I'm not really sure how we can apply or not apply the must be a member, must be a resident of the city. And I don't think that we should have to apply the voting piece either. But again, that's all part of our charter. So I'm not sure how would that apply, not apply to this committee?
Yes, so the official answer is that it does not apply. Those charter requirements do not apply to this committee because it is not a board or commission. So the staff recommendation is not to impose those residency or registered voter requirements, just for the reason that you spoke, because we're looking for a preference toward those who have expertise. So for example, maybe there's someone from the ARC who might not necessarily reside in the city, but would be a really good fit for this board in giving advice to the city council.
Thank you. Well, then I'm good with all the rest of it.
Councillor Weaver.
I agree with everything Councillor Hoppy said. Thanks for the presentation. I would say that I would like at least a portion of the committee be from Wheat Ridge. However we figure that out. It sounds like it's going to be a lot like the sustainability, so maybe that discussion gets tapped into that, how we divide out between expertise and all of these things. I'm fine with some people being from outside Wheat Ridge because of all the things you've discussed, but I would like us to make sure that we do have a majority of citizens on the committee. And I don't quite know how Ms. Hoppy could miss number 1 as the title, that would be my choice. But we'll agree to disagree on that.
Counselor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everything said so far, mostly. I think as far as the makeup of the committee, 10 people with liaison is fine. I would like to see them maybe 1 per district or something like that, and then some sort of residency requirement for most of the board, if not, but not all. Most of the board and not all of the board, if that makes sense. So maybe 6 of the 10 or something like that. But are we going to discuss that tonight, or are we going to move that whole discussion to that study session future?
If you want to have that discussion with everything else, we can kind of table that piece of it,
Okay.
and then we can just kind of go all in on it at the future meeting.
That's fine, because I think all these committees can kind of look the same, so I'm fine punting that to a future study session. I think the budget is good. The fanboy in me wants Jedi. I think I like the idea committee, the number 3, better. As far as actual implementation, I think that DEI and REC are confusing, and CARE is a little too, it's used. So idea or Jedi for me, I guess. And I don't know if that answered all the other questions, so thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Ohm?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with my fellow council members. I kind of think it should be maybe a 60-40 split, where it's definitely a majority of residents. And then as far as my only comment is on the name, ARC was talking about inclusion, and so the first thing that always comes to my mind is going to be accessibility. So I don't know if another idea might be a community for accessibility, race, and equity, instead of advancing. Thank you.
Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. I know we're going to take this up later, but I do like the idea of at least 1 council district appointee, one from each district. And then I would support, a couple of the at-large to be open for, organizational or school partnerships or whatever that looks like, so non-resident. The name, weirdly, I usually hear a lot about names. I'm a little bit more ambivalent here. I mean, of course, with the AT-ATs, it's hard to not want to do Jedi, but I do like the idea, maybe if I were to pick one, and I like the idea around access. A couple issues that come to mind. One is when we were forming the task force, one of the things that people who were involved in advocating for the formation of it, I don't know if we remember this, but we actually did not have access to the names and information about the applicants. It was important to them that we had we didn't know who they were. We were really picking them on their qualifications. So when we bring this back to study session, if that's important, can't remember if that showed up in their recommendations, but that was really important to them when we formed the task force. So that's something we might need to consider, is if we're doing just qualification applications for that. And then the other thing I thought about when I was looking at this is, so the charter, the sort of what they would do, and I love being clear about what they're not going to do. I wish my job description was more clear about what I'm not supposed to do at work. But so I appreciate the $10,000 proposed in the budget to help with sort of the programming piece of it. And I'm a huge believer that you don't have good policy without programming, especially when you're initiating something new. I also want to be really, really mindful, serving on Sustainable Wheat Ridge, how much work goes into actually just organizing and doing events and programming. And so I just want to be really mindful around, the advisory aspect of this is of such value to our city starting anew here. And I just want to be really careful that that their time in service to our city isn't doing so much with events that they're not having time to act as the advisors. So just being mindful of that. as we get this started, because programming can overwhelm a new committee. And I think I've heard from council that we're really looking forward to their advisory role. So other than that, I am very excited about the budget, the timeline, and I also like having the council liaison on there to help keep myself and my peers engaged in what's going on. So thank you.
Councilor Dozman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just wanted to touch on the council budget, and maybe you can kind of provide some clarity as far as Sustainable Wheat Ridge and what their budget is and what kind of like events and promotions and activities fall within their scope. And I guess I just don't really imagine an advisory committee to council necessarily needing those events, activities, and promotions, but maybe you can speak to as to why they would.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we started Sustainable Wheat Ridge, I want to say that it was like a $25,000 budget, and about $7,500 was specifically earmarked for some home energy squad audits through Excel, and then the rest was sort of, what they could make use of it. Now the budget is sort of tied between the division of internally and then also the committee. So now it's closer to $50,000-$75,000 for the whole group, and that's offering the resources through Resource Central. It's a lot of third-party support that the group recommends that staff implement. So things like the Regional Air Quality Council lawnmower exchange program, the Garden in a Box. Those are some big ones. What else? We're planning some lawn replacement stuff for next year. So a lot of it right now has moved from as much of the event programming that it was in the first few years, and has sort of moved into the programming piece, and which could be what the future of this looks like, but this is sort of mimicking what the beginning of the Sustainable Wheat Ridge looked like.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then as far as membership goes, I would agree with my colleagues in regards to one per district, and so that would obviously require residency in Wheat Ridge, and then I would prefer to see an additional 6 at large from Wheat Ridge, and then potentially adding 2 out from outside of the community. But then my question to that would be, how do you confirm that they're a stakeholder within our community, or does that not really matter? It's just a level of expertise that they're offering.
I think depending on how we have that conversation, when we have the future, when we can sort of talk about what we want the application to look like, if we want it to be a blind process, if we want it to be something where a lot of like on Wheat Ridge 101 applications, we say like, what's your relationship with the city? And so it's an open-ended question, and sometimes it's multiple boxes that they're checking, they're business owners and residents, or they go to school in Wheat Ridge, but they actually live in Lakewood. And so there's multiple ways to kind of check that box, but I think during the application process, we can help make that clear.
Thank you. And then as far as names go, I like number 1, Jedi, although I think I heard something about another organization being named that. And then I also agree 3, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Committee. Maybe keep it idea, but then add accessibility instead of advancement. And then I think we're going to delve deeper into that with the Sustainability Committee. But I think somewhere between 10 and 12 members, 10 being from Wheat Ridge and then 2 being outside of Wheat Ridge or stakeholders within the community, I would agree with.
Councilor Hutchinson.
The members who are on the task force now, they're all from Wheat Ridge?
No, they are mostly from Wheat Ridge. If you remember, we had, I think she's now going into her junior year, but she was an 8th grader who used to live in Wheat Ridge, but is now in Lakewood, but her grandparents live, so she had a connection to Wheat Ridge. And I think that was the only one. No, we had one other person from Denver, but otherwise, everybody else was Wheat Ridge. And then we sort of did, I can't remember all the descriptions off the top of my head, but it was like 20 people, and then it was like at least like 2 per district, but then you guys got to handpick. It was the whole thing. But yes, I think there was only 2 out of the 20 originally that were not Wheat Ridge residents.
So I go for the 10 voting members. I think that's a good number. Also having at least one person from each district and then have some from outside is a good thing to go. And also, the amount of money, 10,000, is good for what they want to put on. And also, like the name, the number 3. Also, what did you say for instead of advancement?
So inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility.
Yeah, I like that, number 3. And, yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, additional discussion? I've got Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, keeping in mind that we are going to have a separate study session coming up to talk about how exactly the committees are formed in both Sustainable Wheat Ridge and in this committee. So I will be skipping that piece, but I'll be looking for a consensus to move forward with the rest of the staff recommendations and to pick our name as the IDEA Committee, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility IDEA Committee.
Very good.
I also want to mention there's a Jeffco Jedis already, so it's the same, it does the same thing, it does equity work.
Okay, do we have, did that provide all of the information and?
I think the one thing that we didn't specifically mention, but it sounded like we had consensus on, was the timeline. Does the timeline work?
Okay. Great, we've gotten down to starting item number 4. This is our parking and charging for
Mr. Mayor.
electric vehicles. Yes, sir.
If I can interrupt you real quick, I'm wondering if we can move item number 4 to maybe next week. After the meeting, we can do a special study session and do a presentation and do that discussion then. Can I have a consensus that we move item number 4 to next week?
Okay, there's a consensus to move item number 4 to next week. I don't know what we're going to do the rest of this week.
Staff reports, maybe.
Okay.
Staff reports, are we moving on?
We're moving on.
Okay. Just real quick, reminder, the parade is this, Carnation Festival is this week. Amanda, you always do a cheer for it? Woohoo! The parade is Saturday. Hopefully you're all walking with us. We have shirts for you all coming in. They're due tomorrow. We'll let you know when they do arrive and when they're ready to be picked up. But we will bring them to the mayor's reception. If you're going to be there, you can pick it up there. So just see you at the mayor's reception. If not, maybe at the parade. If not, at Anderson Park.
Good. Okay, and elected officials reports. I'll turn around and go to the clerk. Anything tonight?
I would not dare, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Elected officials. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. I have the Happiness Gardens report. It's doing well. There was significant weeding and mulching that took place, so it's kind of gussied up a little bit, but it is Squashapalooza season. The squash are slowly taking over in a somewhat aggressive but charming way. And but one thing that's showing up a lot is a lot of off-leash dogs in the adjacent Wilmore Davis playground area, which I've been willing to kind of overlook and ignore, but it's there's so many of them that sometimes it's a little bit unpleasant to walk through there. So just want to register if maybe either can get on the radar at some point to do some.
It's in their park area or their playground?
Yeah, it's in the Wilmore
Okay.
Davis, and I kind of get it. There's all those
Square.
townhomes there, and 1 or 2 isn't problematic, but they're starting to like, when I walk my dog along the fence, they're like making my dog all freaked out, and it's acting a little bit more like an off-leash dog park than a one-off thing, so.
The dog gangs of Wheat Ridge.
Yes, yeah, and that's the Happiness Gardens report. If you haven't been, you should go check it out.
Additional elected officials reports. Councilor Weaver.
Carnation Festival is coming up this weekend. Everyone should go. The
Yeah.
parade's going to be great. There is also going to be a pie contest, so I just want to say gloves are off for anyone in Wheat Ridge who wants to bake a pie. It's going to be great pie baking. There will be prizes. There will be there's a all Colorado dessert pie category and a regular dessert pie category. And there will be awesome prizes. The best part, if you're not a pie baker, you will be able to buy slices of pie afterward before you get your spaghetti dinner, same tent, and all of it goes to a local charity. So please come by, check out these pies. You will have to wait till they're finished judging before you can start buying slices of pie. But it'll be a fun time. We'll be in the spaghetti tent starting at 2:30 or 3.
Very good.
We'll
Thank
see you this weekend.
Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as a longtime judge and this year's judge of the pie contest, please make sure you bring the best pie you got, and make sure you bring multiple pies is fine. We're happy to judge. I always leave that tent a little. Yeah. I mean, if you really want to feel bad for me, it is like Thanksgiving Day.
This is why I can't
Just a
ask
lot of,
you.
yeah.
It needs to be term limited.
No, it doesn't. No, that's not a board or a commission or anything like that. That's the one thing that I can actually do. So anyway, definitely make sure you enter the pie contest. Councilor Nosler Beck sent me a text as the meeting was starting. She wasn't feeling well tonight. Obviously, she's got her treatments going on. She really wanted to be here tonight, and she said that she'll make sure she reviews everything and she'll be ready for the next meeting. I just wanted to mention I was at a really cool ribbon cutting a couple weeks ago for a restaurant. It's been open for 10 years here in Wheat Ridge, pretty awesome. West 20th Avenue Grill. I think the owner, he might have a future here in Wheat Ridge, but
Almost a has-been.
Big thank you to Mayor Starker and Mary, and it's a great business and beautiful, absolutely beautiful restaurant, and getting to see all the people that go in there and from the neighborhoods, it was pretty cool to see. So congratulations on 10 years.
Well, thank you very much, and we had a wonderful celebration. The best thing about that restaurant is the great support that we have from our community that comes to dine with us. So I want to express my appreciation to all the folks who wished us well and who come to our restaurant to have dinner. So we appreciate it. I had one other thing tonight, and I'm really pleased to announce that NASA has recently announced that the crew that will be heading to space in 2024 to NASA's SpaceX Crew 8 mission in 2024, and the commander of the space expedition for this is a Wheat Ridge native, Matthew Dominic, and it's really terrific to have a Wheat Ridge native going up into space, and more than that, to be the commander. And we want to send all of our best wishes for very safe travels and a return to Earth safely. So, Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I wanted to extend my gratitude to all of my colleagues that participate in the parade. Amanda, you've always been a huge supporter, not only in the parade and the festival, but with the pie contest, and then Corey Stites and Personal Achievement is a sponsor every year, and they show up and participate in the parade, and obviously judge the pie contest as well. And I've had several meetings with various city departments in regards to logistics as far as the festival and the parade in the last couple of weeks, and it really goes to show the true spirit and dedication that we have amongst our residents in this community. And every year it just renews my love for Wheat Ridge and for the community as a whole, because it's just a great show of support for our city. So I just wanted to extend that gratitude as we move into this weekend of the festival, and I hope everybody enjoys it. And then I did want to announce and appreciate our city manager, Patrick Goff, sending this. The Fruitdale School Lofts was recognized in the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and in regards to their sustainability project and being 100% powered by solar panels. And it kind of just briefly touched on the renovation of it becoming from a school into housing. So wonderful, project that happened in District 4. I've attended Fruitdale as a very young child, and really appreciated seeing that building be repurposed, and glad it's receiving some recognition. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any additional matters to come before our study session tonight, before we stand adjourned? We will be back here. Councilor Hutchinson.
Regarding Fruitdale, I'm very surprised to see the picture of the solar on the flat roof, because I've talked to solar people before, and they stated that they don't do solar on flat roofs.
Really?
So, I mean, the whole roof has solar panels,
Yeah.
and then behind it, they do. I mean, the new construction that's being built here is mostly flat on top, right? Not like arched roofs and things like that. So it's kind of interesting how they can do that when the solar companies say they can't do it.
I never heard that. I always thought that flat roofs were good for a solar array, but anyway, that's beyond my expertise. All right, so thank you all. We will be back here in a regular meeting next week at 6:30, so be safe, travel around our city in a very safe and cautious manner. We hope to see everybody back next week. Thank you. We're adjourned.